At this moment, it seems that fate itself has permitted everything, and a wild smile does not leave the hero's face. A bastion of evil rises among the dead rocks, surrounded by clouds of terrible creatures. Every stone of this ominous castle is steeped in an ancient, suffocating darkness. Dark vaults and ominous silhouettes of trees create an atmosphere of inevitable death. The ruined walls reveal a view of scorched lands where nothing living remains. But the heroes are not going to retreat. Out of the 5 powerful kings, they have already defeated 3. All that remains is to break the resistance of the last 2, and a path to victory will be open. Hundreds of demonic abominations rush to attack, but this only provokes the heroes. The air is rent with the furious screams as the monsters charge forward. Strings of terrifying winged creatures cover the sky, eager to tear apart the uninvited guests. Legions of merciless undead bare their teeth in anticipation of a bloody massacre. A cold determination flashes in his eyes, ready to crush the fierce threat. The magical blade cuts through the darkness, leaving a blinding, shining trail. Blow after blow, the heroes cut their way through hordes of bloodthirsty monsters. A blinding flash of light illuminates the battlefield, erasing obstacles in its path. The look is filled with stern strength, because there is nowhere else to retreat. They rush forward through endless corridors, pursued by clouds of monsters. The speed of movement reaches its limit when every second is worth its weight in gold. The face lights up with the mad passion of battle in the face of so many enemies. A powerful spell strike rains down upon enemies, turning the battlefield into chaos. The corners of Hera's lips lift in a predatory grin, anticipating a new round of destruction. Anissa Slywood, meanwhile, stands frozen in concentration in the midst of the raging whirlwind, offering up a prayer. Holy light envelops her figure in a soft but unbreakable aura of purity. The energy is concentrated in her hands, turning the fragile nun into a stronghold of divine will. A sudden roar rent the air as the demon tried to catch her off guard from behind. But a steel swing of a sickle interrupts the monster mid-sentence, cutting through air and flesh. Anissa Slywood turns around with a serene, almost angelic smile on her face. Moron Rooker, with a wild roar, rushes into the thick of the fight, raising his heavy axe. His devastating, wave-sized blow crushes the demons into dust, clearing the passage. But even after that, he stops only for a moment to cast a cold glance over the battlefield. Gemaldinez grins with brutal enthusiasm, tasting victory. Gemaldinez rushes past, swiftly crossing the space in pursuit of glory. He rushes forward with a furious cry, filled with the spirit of competition. Hordes of demons block his path, but this only fuels his passion. His voice booms over the ruins, demanding that all enemies be removed from the road. A deadly whirlwind of blades cuts through the ranks of monsters, leaving only bloody shreds in its wake. Gamaldinus pauses for a second, breathing heavily and assessing the scale of the destruction. He victoriously sheathes the blade, glancing at his companion who is frozen next to him. Suddenly, the tension rises when Vermouth Lionheart appears with his unfailingly cool superiority, and many more trials await the allies ahead as the dungeon is preparing new surprises. The fatal blow breaks through the defense, and Gamaldinus, with a cry of despair, calls for his comrade to help. Vermouth Lionheart responds instantly to the call, throwing himself into the thick of the deadly battle. But the monstrous attack reaches its target before help can arrive, piercing the warrior through and through. Anissa Slywood and Amelia Mervyn freeze in horror as blood spatters across the cold stone. The merciless monster raises its clawed paws in triumph, reveling in the chaos it has sown. Gamaldinus staggers back, choking on blood from the fatal wound in his chest. The monster looks around the battlefield with satisfaction, anticipating final victory. A wild grin never leaves the creature's face, confident in its invulnerability. But Vermouth Lionheart has no intention of retreating in the face of a formidable enemy. With lightning-fast determination, the elite fighter closes the distance to strike back. A powerful blow cuts through the air, forcing the enemy to retreat under the onslaught. The aristocratic blade flashes with a blinding light, inflicting a deep wound on the monster. A powerful counterattack sends the monster flying back, shaking the vaults of the dungeon. The rest of the squad rushes forward, calling out in horror to their fallen comrade. They surround the fallen warrior, understanding the full weight of the loss he has suffered. Vermouth Lionheart turns away silently, clenching his fists in impotent anger. A heavy silence hangs over the survivors as Vermouth Lionheart stares into space. A weak, bitter smile freezes on the lips of the defeated Gamaldinus. The fighter's hands clasp tightly in a farewell handshake, erasing the boundaries of past grievances, God and Mimia and Gravel, and even in the face of imminent death, his gaze remained unbending. Through the pain and caked blood, only the warrior's proud smile showed through. Anissa quietly whispered a prayer as she saw her comrade off on his final journey. Moron held back the tears that welled up, recognizing the strength of his fallen brother in arms. Amelia couldn't help but sob as she said goodbye to someone dear to her heart, but the memory of those days held completely different colors, not at all heroic. Eugene trampled the hated waste paper in rage, not believing his eyes. What impudence to spread such tales about his great past! Who dared to call him stupid Hamel in this pathetic little book? Is the author of this waste paper really one of those weaklings who were snatched from him in past centuries? Senya, Vermouth, Anissa, and Moron were awarded high-sounding titles, but only he was given such an offensive nickname. However, history remembered them quite differently, capturing their heroic exodus in legends. After all, he is the same Gamel who fell in an epic battle with the demon lords 3 centuries ago. But instead of the peace he deserved, fate gave him a very peculiar surprise. Eugene's gaze falls on an antique portrait hanging in a majestic frame. Looking down at him from the canvas is none other than the legendary Vermouth Lionheart himself. 13-year-old Eugene Lionheart now bears that name, finding himself in the heart of a rival clan. Memories of the past are intertwined with the harsh reality of a noble house, where every step is under surveillance. Focusing on tightening the ankle weights, the young man prepares for a new day of testing. With a habitual movement, Eugene removed his training sword, knowing that this blade will serve him faithfully for the last time. The youth's superhuman strength bursts forth in a crushing flurry of blows. The wooden mannequin cannot withstand the monstrous pressure and literally shatters into tiny pieces. Each swing of this fragile training blade cuts through the air with such fury that it seems as if space itself is bursting at the seams. Gillard Lionheart freezes in place, stunned by the destructive power revealed before him. Gillard shakes his head reproachfully, looking with horror at what another training apparatus has become. Eugene turns to his father, maintaining an unchildlike, frightening seriousness on his face. In his hands he holds only a pitiful semblance of a real weapon, which already shows signs of excessive strain. The elder Lionheart swallows nervously, uneasily aware that in a direct confrontation his reckless son could overcome him. A dangerous fire burns in the cold yellow eyes of the young man, completely devoid of childish naivety and meekness. The seasoned veteran frowned silently, weighing the gravity of the situation and unable to find the right words. The young man's next blow shatters a wooden pole into splinters, demonstrating his monstrous physical fitness. Eugene casts a disdainful glance at the cheap equipment, sharply criticizing those who supplied a clan with such low-quality weapons. Gillard immediately interrupts the heir's bold speeches with a warning cough, calling for him to moderate his ardor. However, Eugene himself considers the Lionheart clan system itself to be absurd and unfair. According to ancient custom, all potential heirs are obliged to gather in the family nest in order to prove their right to the great family name in a fierce struggle. But the rules of this game are inherently unequal, serving only as a tool for suppressing those who are undesirable. The descendants of the direct line are bathed in privileges from a young age, receiving the best weapons and instruction, while others only envy them. As if echoing the young man's bitter thoughts, Gillard looks at the remains of the destroyed mannequin with a heavy sigh. The old man reflects with bitterness on how many hardships and injustices the boy could have avoided if he had been born into the main branch of the family. After all, then his colossal, frightening talent would not have been locked in the grip of harsh restrictions and clan prejudices. Noticing the anxiety on his father's face, young Gamaldinus immediately rushes to calm his elder, although deep down he understands everything perfectly well. He only sighs heavily, mentally reproaching himself for his excessive simplicity and lack of noble origin. The father, swallowing hard, puts his hands on the boy's shoulders, trying to warn him against making a fatal mistake. His voice trembled with hidden fear as he reminded his son of the immutable law. Commoners were forbidden the path of competition with the offspring of the main family. Gamaldinus nods obediently, agreeing with his mentor's words with a slight smile. But behind this mask of humility lies the cold, calculating mind of a man for whom the rules of the clan are just an empty phrase. Can those spoiled 10-year-olds, convinced to the marrow of their bones of their superiority, compare to him? The thought of this causes only dull irritation and mortal boredom in the young genius. The boy's gaze falls on a harmless training dummy standing in the yard. The next moment, a powerful, invisible impulse obliterates the wooden target, leaving only a pile of splinters. The bewildered father stands frozen in fear to the side, watching the frightening power that his son is forced to hide. The balance of power within the clan is astounding. 3 heirs from the main branch, including twins from a concubine, 5 representatives of the glorious branches, and a whole army of other small-time punks lost in the backwaters of an influential family. Gamaldinus raises his blade with a confident movement, ready to demonstrate the full depth of his fighting skill. Flashes of furious energy cut through the air as the blade whistles through space with incredible destructive force. With a predatory grin on his lips, he issues a bold challenge: let the heirs of the great family show what they are really worth. Soon, the carriage comfortably delivers the young man to the massive gates of a luxurious estate, where he's already met by servants and his faithful father. A snow-white carriage, drawn by a pair of strong horses, rolls smoothly along the road, carrying the young rebel away to meet a new destiny. Gamaldinus looks out the window at the passing landscapes, remembering the delusion that haunted him in his past life. Back then, he sincerely believed that his incredible strength was a gift from above, a unique blessing of fate. The name of the legendary Vermouth Lionheart thundered across the continent as a symbol of unrivaled mastery that united blade and magic. During his lifetime, he was revered as the greatest warrior of the era, whose triumph seemed eternal and unshakable. But time passed, leaving legends behind, and while the world was changing, young Gamaldinus, in the guise of the reincarnated Eugene, silently gazed at the landscapes floating past the window. I also remembered other comrades in arms whose fates had been no less bizarre. For example, that daring girl, Amelia Mervyn, who managed to climb to the top of the magic tower. Anissa Slywood has gained incredible influence, earning the sincere adoration and blind faith of those around her. Even that reckless fool Moron Rur managed to found his own kingdom, amazing the imagination with his tenacity. Each of them went their own way, leaving behind their shared past, but Eugene was tormented by completely different thoughts. With each passing day, the internal tension grew, forcing the guy to clench his fists until his knuckles turned white. After all, despite all the loud oaths and promises once made, the Demon King still continued to rule in the shadows. Looking at the birds flying past, Eugene bitterly recalled that fateful vow, broken by death itself. The crew continued its long journey through dense forests, taking the young heir to meet new challenges. The companion sitting opposite him immediately noticed the change in the young man's mood and sympathetically inquired about the reason for his anxiety. But as soon as Palago Lionheart spoke of his impending arrival, a sly, all-knowing smile blossomed on his face. "If you're so nervous on the road, you'll have a hard time in the family home, Mr. Eugene," he said with feigned concern. Eugene only smiled in agreement in response, hiding the fire raging inside behind his outward serenity. The carriage wheels clattered rhythmically along the bumpy road, inexorably bringing the travelers closer to the gates of the main estate. Unable to bear this sarcastic tone, Eugene flared up, not understanding why his companion was so openly boasting about foreign lands. Palago simply waved it off carelessly, noting that managing such vast territories was not at all that difficult, since portals were installed everywhere for that purpose. If it's that simple, then why are we shaking in this carriage? Eugene couldn't resist, crossing his arms angrily over his chest. "Because you, young master, do not yet have the highest permission to use them," Palago retorted sarcastically, instantly imagining this comical scene in Eugene's head. The heavy wrought iron gates of the Lionheart family's majestic estate slowly open their arms to welcome the arriving guest. Eugene gazes out at the view with a cold, penetrating glint in his eyes. A gust of cold wind crosses the road, raising fallen leaves to the rhythmic tapping of a garden broom. The estate greets the young man with a frightening, almost sterile silence in which something ominous seems to lurk. A skeptical smirk touches the corners of Eugene's lips. Is the grand reception really going to be limited to this silent void? Together with his escort, he walks along a spacious alley where even the servants are busy with their work with a frightening mechanical detachment. The boy's hand instinctively falls on his chest, feeling the weight of the family mark, accessible only to true blood. Eugene immediately breaks the silence with a question about the fate of the rest of the relatives, wanting to clarify the rules of this game. Palago helpfully explains that the young gentleman arrived first and escorts him to the prepared chambers. The castle's majestic towers rise above the gardens, hiding behind their facades the centuries-old secrets of a great clan. At the threshold of the spacious room, the guest is met by a young servant. Bowing respectfully, she reverently displays a small silver bell, inviting people to call on her for any needs. Eugene looks at his personal maid appraisingly, mentally noting the oddity of such a generous gift. The girl sheepishly admits that she is only 16 and that she only completed her studies yesterday. A predatory smile blossoms on Eugene's face. The inexperienced girl next to him is clearly someone's subtle and evil intent. He crosses his arms and demands to know the exact time of arrival of the rest of the clan members, not wanting to waste time. The maid's eyes widen in fear when the young man suddenly rises from his seat and demands to be shown the training ground immediately. The ancient walls of the castle preserve echoes of past eras, watching every step of the wayward heir. Somewhere in the half-closed corridors, an indifferent question is heard about the newcomer who has disturbed the peace of the estate. A caustic voiceover smirks as it recalls the name of the one who will soon turn everything here upside down. The idle inhabitants of the estate easily discuss the one who arrived from the remote province on the western outskirts. The caustic taunts never cease. They say that the local villagers are more comfortable wielding pitchforks than training swords. Envious glances and malicious grins reveal a genuine desire to get rid of the uninvited guest. But young Lord Lionheart quickly puts a stop to excessive cruelty, suggesting that they limit themselves to a mere demonstrative reprimand. His companion readily agrees, admiring her comrade's calculating cunning. The couple rushes to put the plan into action, confident of their own impunity. However, reality has a cruel surprise in store for them. Instead of a confused provincial, they are faced with something far more dangerous. The flash of rage in the newcomer's golden eyes makes the blood run cold. The smile instantly slips from the smug face of Lord Lionheart, replaced by sticky horror. The window bursts open with a sharp gust of wind, as if the estate itself were shaking in the face of a new threat. And the Schadenfreude turns to shock when the supposed simpleton demonstrates frightening composure. Meanwhile, in the quiet courtyard of the estate, a completely different drama is unfolding. Gamaldinus grips the training shaft in his hands with such force as if he were facing a mortal enemy. Every movement is imbued with iron discipline and a thirst to surpass oneself. Cutting through the air with a whistling blow, he puts all his strength into the training. Memories of a past life haunt me, forcing me to move to the limits of human capabilities. After all, being reborn in the body of a descendant of the legendary Vermouth Lionheart himself opened up incredible potential for him. Every blow echoes loudly, proving that this invincible warrior has no intention of giving up in the face of fate. The power of the family flows through the veins, turning every training session into a dance with death and triumph. Meanwhile, young Eugene continues his persistent training, proving his superiority time and again under Nin's admiring gaze. The maid can hardly believe what she sees, realizing the enormity of the load. After all, he is training, weighed down with heavy sandbags. However, a sudden intrusion breaks this concentrated atmosphere, causing Nin to freeze in fear and surprise. Uninvited guests emerge from the shadows. Impudent young gentlemen from a branch of the clan immediately make themselves known. Nina panics and tries to endure her fear of the suddenly appearing aristocrats, but they are already ready to cause a scandal. The arrogant young aristocrat, with a disdainful look, demands an answer, pointing his finger at the troublemaker. But Eugene doesn't even think about being embarrassed in the face of the impudent upstarts, proudly standing with a training spear in his hands. His irritated look makes it clear that he is not going to tolerate anyone's stupid attacks. While ill-wishers whisper behind your back, preparing to poison the air with poisonous words, the situation escalates to the limit. Rage flares in the eyes of the insulted aristocrat when he is faced with the bastard's blatant disrespect. Anger fills his soul, and he demands an immediate apology for such blatant insolence. But Eugene's answer sounds chillingly calm, as if other people's cries are an empty sound for him. For a second, bewilderment catches the arrogant youth off guard, but pride immediately takes over. He waves his fist in impotent rage, not understanding why this guy is treating him as an equal. Eugene coldly parries the question, reminding us of the simple truths that are so alien to arrogant aristocrats. Harsh words cut through the air, finally tearing the masks off the hypocritical relatives. Suddenly, the instigator's companion reminds him of the pressing problem in time, changing the course of the squabble. The aristocrat immediately changes his anger to a commanding tone, trying to hurt Eugene with a dirty hint. But Eugene remains completely unperturbed, meeting the stream of insults with icy indifference. Devoted Nina humbly bows her head, acknowledging the unquestionable authority of the true Master Eugene. Eugene merely lazily throws out a daring order, pointing to the carriage he arrived in. Seal Lionheart freezes in horror, and the maids who arrived almost lose consciousness from such impudence. Seal's face contorts with animalistic rage, and his eyes turn bloodshot with anger. He starts shouting, demanding an answer and reminding them of his high birth. But Eugene interrupts him with a mocking smile, easily stating his name. Seal's expression instantly changes, barely containing the anger seething inside. Eugene responds to him with utmost coldness, openly declaring his disdain. At that moment, Seal pulls a wooden blade from its sheath. His hand confidently grips the weapon, and the air around him begins to tremble with the intensity of emotions. CL, his anger burning crimson, lets out a fierce cry of defiance. He demands a duel, consumed by the desire to immediately teach the insolent fellow a lesson. Eugene, however, meets this hysterical outburst with a lazy grin on his lips. He doesn't even intend to draw his weapon, advising his heated opponent to cool down and get out of sight. But CL can no longer be stopped. He is offended by his opponent's feigned indifference. Eugene wearily puts his hand to his head, showing with his whole appearance how tired this circus has made him. CL interprets this in his own way, accusing Eugene of cowardice. Eugene's gaze suddenly hardens, revealing a dangerous, predatory presence behind the mask of indifference. CL continues to turn up his nose, demanding submission and a public apology. Eugene finally loses interest in this childish performance and throws off his training weights with a soft sigh. The ground beneath his feet shook from the weight of the fallen armor, leaving a stunned CL to wonder what kind of power this guy was hiding. CL, with a challenge in his voice, throws out a casual order, demanding that his opponent remove his training weights. Eugene just looks at him coldly, slowly unbuttoning the heavy cuffs on his sleeves. Several pood-sized sacks fall to the ground with a dull thud, raising clouds of stone chips. This roar makes all the students watching from the side freeze. CL stares at the fallen bags in shock, realizing the folly of his overconfidence. Meanwhile, Eugene calmly picks up an abandoned wooden pole, turning it into a deadly weapon. Amelia watches the events with delight, wishing with all her heart for her defender's victory. After all, her own peace of mind depends on the outcome of this fight. CL, with a manic gleam in his eyes, abruptly rips the scarlet scarf from his shoulder. Shouting loudly the name of Eugene Lionheart, he publicly issues a daring challenge to a duel. But the ground beneath CL's feet suddenly bursts from the monstrous pressure of the awakened aura. Eugene looks up, his gaze filled with icy determination and animalistic fury. Amelia freezes in horror, realizing that the situation has gone too far. A powerful blow from a wooden pole rips through the air and crashes down on the enemy in a crushing wave. CL chokes out a scream as the blunt tip pierces his chest. A blinding flash of energy cuts through space, scattering clouds of dust. The powerful impulse sends CL flying backwards, along with the remnants of his arrogance. Eugene holds his position confidently, marking the end of the short fight. A frightened Amelia immediately rushes to her fallen comrade, sincerely fearing for his condition. CL freezes on the ground like a pillar of salt, unable to believe such a humiliating and quick defeat. CL can barely contain the rage seething inside him, unable to believe that what happened was real. His voice breaks into a cry of indignation, demanding justice and calling what happened foul play. Gamaldinus simply calmly parries the accusations, reminding them of the strict rules for the start of a duel. An insulted CL tries to object, pointing out the enemy's dubious superiority in magical training. His eyes narrow in anger as he states that the speed of the attack was inhumane and left no chance for defense. Gamaldinus's cunning eyes sparkle with mischief, anticipating a funny continuation of this squabble. However, his opponent's impudent response only makes CL gnash his teeth helplessly in frustration. Memories of the brief skirmish flash before my eyes, reminding me of the moment of the crushing blow. Gamaldinus analyzes his opponent's tactical errors with a slight grin, noting his instinctive reactions. He even generously praises the newcomer for his potential, which can be revealed in future harsh battles. CL literally starts shaking inside from such humiliating patronage. Pain and humiliation mix together, causing the guy to double over right in front of the astonished audience. And the victor continues to stick to his guns, reminding the proud man of the rules of honor of the noble house of Lionheart. CL swallows hard, choking on the bitter saliva, overcome with emotion and searing shame. With his arms crossed over his chest, Gamaldinus suddenly realizes the gravity of the situation and freezes in awkward thought. The silence of the courtyard is broken by the alarming call of the approaching butler, whose face is distorted with genuine horror. The experienced servant freezes for a second, assessing the scale of the disaster unfolding on the training ground. Meanwhile, Gamaldinus's penetrating gaze latches onto the new figure, assessing the absence of the familiar coat of arms on the chest. Paradoxically, this formidable and impressive newcomer does not at all belong to the proud elite of the main branch. However, his appearance clearly promises to radically change the course of the protracted confrontation. The boy chokes on tears and foam, frantically screaming out the name of his mentor. The faithful servant rushes to console the defeated child, but the bitterness of defeat burns the young man from within. Through sobs and trembling, he confesses the most important thing: his self-confident duel turned into a complete collapse. Hezar frowned, having a hard time digesting what he heard from this boy. Finally noticing Eugene Lionheart standing nearby, the teacher's expression suddenly changed. Hezar carefully holds the crying Sion by the shoulders, appearing as a formidable guardian of the young master. Eugene Lionheart proudly proclaims his heritage, coldly assessing the reactions of his opponents. Hearing the name Gidel, Hezar instantly connects the dots, recalling Jihad's influential family. Hiding his confusion, the teacher enters into a dialogue, trying to find out the reasons for the sudden conflict. Eugene Lionheart throws out an accusation against his opponent without a shadow of a doubt, without any intention of smoothing things over. Sion panics and tries to refute the offender's words, furiously denying such ridiculous accusations. But Eugene Lionheart only narrows his eyes, emphasizing that the insult affected not only the boy's honor, but also his father's. Hezar presses his hand to his face in confusion, realizing that the situation has gone too far and there is nothing to formally find fault with. In an effort to quickly hush up the incident, the teacher carefully leads the stubborn child away from prying eyes. As they say goodbye, Eugene's faithful companion waves a friendly hand to the departing rivals. Eugene Lionheart himself sees them off with a slight farewell gesture, maintaining an imperturbable expression on his face. Soon, Eugene's appetite takes over. He greedily pounces on mountains of food, gobbling up the meat with both cheeks. Turning to Nina, the young man casually inquires about the latest news from the mansion. A devoted servant reports the latest news, mentioning Gargus Lionheart's imminent arrival through the portal. As he continues to eat, Eugene takes stock. The long-awaited blood ritual is inexorably approaching, and events are unfolding much faster than he had planned. The doors of a massive mansion swing open before the young hero, releasing him into a spacious courtyard. Stopping on a hill, the guy confidently looks around the majestic domain of the clan. His gaze is full of hidden strength and determination to show everyone his true potential. One sharp gesture, and ahead lies only the inevitable clash with the ambitions of other heirs. Meanwhile, in the silence of the luxurious hall, the imperious hostess stood frozen, immersed in her thoughts. In the spacious room before her, those who must answer for the recent shame line up. The woman is in no hurry to turn around, but her heavy presence makes even the proudest tremble. The sharp blow of a fan against a palm breaks the silence, turning into a menacing omen. The elderly manager, with fear in his eyes, confirms the lady's worst suspicions, and the mistress of the estate, with a cold smile, orders the guilty boy to come closer. He obediently steps forward, feeling how the clouds above his head thicken with each passing moment. A light poke in the chest with a fan echoes with sharp pain and humiliation under the cold-blooded gaze of the mother. She glances at her trembling assistant, demanding confirmation of the truth of the unpleasant rumors. The frightened man obediently confirms the words about the origin of the impudent boy. The lady turns her gaze to the portrait, as if weighing in her mind the scale of the coming storm. The losing guy's companion appears next to him, involuntarily attracting the hostess's attention. The woman coldly asks her for the details of such an unexpected defeat. The girl, with trepidation in her voice, begins to recount the chronicles of the ill-fated duel. Hearing about the crushing defeat, the powerful mistress freezes in profound bewilderment. The defeated heir lowers his head, not daring to meet anyone's gaze. The young heir looks at his mother with trepidation, not daring to raise his eyes from horror. The mother's anger knows no bounds. A hard slap sobers the young man faster than any words. Her eyes, wide with rage, reveal a burning contempt for this shameful defeat. How could he lose to a simple boy without a drop of magic in front of all the nobility? Tears of helplessness roll down the cheeks of a teenager, begging for forgiveness for his shattered hopes. At this tense moment, the faithful servant obediently bows his head before his angry mistress. The sinister glint in her eyes betrays a cold command. Discipline in the family will be tightened at any cost. A long shadow falls over the trembling youth as his mother gives a merciless order to take him away. The servant carefully but firmly leads away the tearful heir under the heavy gaze of his mistress. The heavy doors close behind them, leaving the woman alone with her dark ambitions. With a smooth movement of her fan, she hides a predatory smile, thinking over a new insidious plan. A dangerous spark of pragmatic calculation flashes in her eyes. She turns her gaze to the other heiress, preparing a special role for her in this game. A soft but frightening smile touches her lips, promising many difficulties in the future. The girl listens attentively to her mother's instructions as she assesses her hidden potential. The mistress's thoughts are full of dark desires, but the clan's strict rules tie her hands. Internal strife threatens to attract the attention of the guardians of tradition, which must not be allowed under any circumstances. Therefore, instead of open reprisals, She chooses the path of intrigue and surveillance of the unwanted rival. The young heiress willingly agrees to this dangerous mission, eager to learn more about the mysterious enemy. And the mother's predatory smile completes this dark picture of a nascent conspiracy. Among the young heirs of the clan, 3 stand out: the eldest Hanson, the daring Deacon, and the timid Juice. But the hero has no time to think. He rushes off, trying to make it on time. Every second counts, sweat pours into the eyes, and the frantic pace makes you breathless. A sudden shout makes him freeze in the middle of the yard. A frightened Nina rushes towards him. The faithful maid hurries to warn him of the impending delay, barely catching her breath from excitement. The hero glances around the spacious courtyard, estimating the time remaining until the meeting. Nina panics and tries to hand him the formal outfit, completely forgetting about her manners. Thoughts are feverishly spinning in the guy's head, weighing all the risks of his upcoming appearance. There is no time to change clothes. He decides to appear before the elders in what he trained in. The estate's ceremonial alleys are buried in flowers, and rows of guards stand frozen in anticipation of the head's arrival. Finding himself among the gathered relatives, he casts a wary glance at those around him. Standing next to the rest of the family is Anisilla, the head's second wife, radiating confidence. A little behind rises the stern figure of the first wife, whose presence inspires an unspoken horror. And at this moment, the young Yod Lionheart finds himself in the center of everyone's attention. Ceremonial carriages and horsemen slowly approach the front gates of the estate. At the head of the procession rides Gillard Lionheart himself, whose majestic appearance brooks no objection. The gray-haired patriarch's gaze pierces through and through, making anyone tremble before his authority. Beside him stands the confident and ambitious Lord Lionheart, radiating a hidden danger. The tension mounts as the procession stops in front of the breathless relatives. Little Yod Lionheart hangs his head, feeling the full weight of the oppressive family atmosphere. Diener Lionheart gently pats his grandson on the head, showering him with approving praise for his success and unprecedented growth. The boy swallows with difficulty, the lump in his throat, feeling colossal pressure from every word of the elder. The old man towers over him like an unshakable rock, demanding perfection and making him tremble before the face of the great family. Looking around the procession, Diener Lionheart notices familiar faces standing in respectful anticipation. He greets the growing children with a warm smile, noting how quickly the inexorable time flies. The patriarch's attention is drawn to the modest figure of Gillard Lionheart, standing surrounded by loyal servants. The head of the clan, with a gentle smile, says words of apology for missing such a joyful event in their family. Gillard Lionheart waves his hand sheepishly, accepting his older brother's apology with unwavering devotion. The patriarch's gaze falls on the timid youths, modestly standing apart among the representatives of the lateral branches. Diener Lionheart invites everyone to a lavish feast to share a meal and strengthen family ties. In a sepulchral tone, he declares that over dinner they will discuss the upcoming and terrifying blood ritual. The bright light of a massive crystal chandelier fills the luxurious hall where members of the great house gather. The huge dining table freezes in anticipation, dividing the relatives into 2 tense sides. The walls of the ceremonial hall silently preserve the centuries-old history and secrets of a noble family. An ominous silence falls over the long table, full of hidden anxiety and unspoken grievances. Luxurious patterned panels frame the hall, emphasizing the grandeur and inaccessibility of the dynasty. The gloomy faces of those gathered reveal the internal tension before the inevitable trials. A stern Gargus Lionheart and a focused Dejira sit side by side, carefully assessing the situation. Gamaldinus's gaze glides over the faces of the new arrivals, trying to understand the true balance of power among the noble relatives. The stranger watches the proceedings with a mysterious smile, wondering why those who should not participate in the ritual are present. Melkik Elkaya looks at the uninvited guest in bewilderment, trying to grasp the scale of what is happening. She quickly turns to her father for clarification, but he only remains mysteriously silent. Gillard Lionheart was planning to introduce the guest later, but he gets ahead of himself. The heads of the great families freeze in tension, recognizing the unexpected visitor. Rovarian Serpis smiles radiantly, like an old acquaintance, but the atmosphere at the table instantly becomes tense. The faces of those present are distorted with amazement and fear at the sound of this name. Diener Lionheart and the other elders can't believe their ears. And at that moment, Eugene almost chokes from surprise, spitting out the drink. He clears his throat loudly, trying to come to his senses under the surprised looks. The rest of the meeting participants watch the sudden attack with concern. In Eugene's head, a whole chain of succession of this legendary school of magic quickly forms. After all, it was the wise Senna who stood at the origins of all magical treatises and teachings. She guided generations of magicians and updated ancient tomes, and now her distant successor proudly bears the title of Head of the Red Tower. Gillard Lionheart looks at Eugene with a heavy, searching gaze. The head of the clan addresses the young man, mentioning Theonus's words. He recounts a complaint about a recent conflict between their children. The young heir swallows the lump in his throat, feeling the full gravity of the situation. But Eugene responds with unexpected coldness, showing that he holds no grudge. After all, the weak are not destined to defend their honor, but he proved his superiority in a fair fight. Diner Lionheart showers the young man with caustic praise, comparing him to his own father. Xiang cringes under the weight of that piercing gaze, barely finding the strength to squeeze out a short confirmation. But the elder mercilessly continues to press on the sore spot, reproaching the boy for his cowardly desire to hide his eyes. Xiang only presses his head into his shoulders more tightly, not daring to make a sound under this heavy pressure. Diner mercilessly reminds everyone gathered of the recent duel and the insults that went unanswered. Every word of the elder sounds like a sentence, causing the young heir to tremble with fear and shame. After all, to bear the name Lionheart and to be the blood of Vermouth itself obliges one to protect not only one's own pride. Eugene looks with cold contempt at the man who recently considered himself invincible. And Xiang, overwhelmed by resentment and rage, could barely hold back his tears, feeling completely humiliated. A caustic smile flashes through Eugene's mind. Such apologies are not worth a dime. However, Diner quickly pulls himself together, returning his face to a mask of imperturbable dignity. The voice of the Lionheart family is always stern, silencing even the most daring. Eugene, meanwhile, thoughtfully changes the subject, noting that their family lives in the middle of nowhere. He throws his head back, allowing his heavy thoughts to dissolve under the vaults of the luxurious hall. The rest of the family digests what they have heard with amazement and disbelief, trying to comprehend the scale of what they have heard. Did this boy really train alone, without any teachers or mentors behind him? And yet he was able to crush the proudest Xiang in a fair fight? A predatory, anticipatory smile blossoms on Daner's face. The upcoming ritual promises to be truly exciting. The doors of the main hall swing open, revealing a procession of maids with sumptuous dishes. They deftly arrange the exquisite dishes while Diner hospitably invites everyone to the table. Night envelops the dark grandeur of the castle, where lights burn brightly behind the high windows. The servants silently change empty plates, making room for new dishes. All the clan members gather around the long dining table, listening attentively to the leader's words. Gillard Lionheart, with restraint and solemnity, announces the true purpose of this evening. The young members of the collateral branches tense up, feeling an unpleasant chill in their chests. They understand perfectly well that the traditional ritual has always put them in a clearly losing position. Gillard angrily discusses how unfair it is to deny them the chance to wield weapons and magic equally. After all, in a cruel world, strength decides everything, and the weak are destined only to be vanquished. Young Lord Lionheart listens to these speeches with barely concealed tension in his eyes. The elder demands that absolutely all members of the great clan prove their true power. In Gamel's thoughts, the Death Knight ironically contrasts the stern pride of the past with the mores of today. A mocking smile touches his lips. This descendant turns out to be much softer than the legendary founder. Gillard looks around at everyone and announces that this time the fate of the challenge will be decided by a special guest. A lively stranger quickly bursts into the conversation, ready to make his contribution to this gathering. He plays with a strand of blonde hair carelessly, radiating confidence and wily charm. The younger heirs freeze in horror as a barrier glowing with magic rises before them. Right in the middle of the table, a complex, shining labyrinth appears, created by a skillful illusion. At the very center of this mystical puzzle stands the menacing figure of a guard. The magician casually tosses the tiny figurine of the monster, reminding him of the rules of this deadly game. The magician's fingers crush the illusion into dust with a soft crunch, and Lord Lionheart notes with undisguised admiration the immense power of the head of the magic tower. The rules of the test are crystal clear. The labyrinth is full of dangerous traps and countless opponents surrounding every daredevil. The catch is that a normal passage through the dungeon, although safe, is guaranteed to deprive applicants of the coveted top scores. However, the cunning Lord Lionheart immediately grasps the essence of the matter and switches his attention to the main prize. Pelalgo Lionheart watches with restraint as the young heir begins to make ambitious plans. Gillard Lionheart steps into the arena, his commanding presence leaving potential opponents breathless. The patriarch, with a sly smile, announces the main prize. The winner will be able to take absolutely anything they want from the family treasury. Hearing this, Lord Lionheart is literally transformed, flaring up with greedy delight and anticipation. Without wasting a second, he strides resolutely down the luxurious corridor, determined to hit the jackpot. His eyes glow with predatory passion, because now his goal is not just victory, but absolute superiority. But other contenders unexpectedly appear on the ambitious guy's path. Malkit El Haya and Melkit El Haya block his path, ready to defend their rights. Malkit El Haya crosses his arms over his chest, giving his opponent a heavy and challenging look. Melkite El Haya maintains an icy calm, silently supporting his comrade's position. Lord Lionheart gives them a dismissive look, clearly unimpressed by such an obstacle. Not intending to waste time on unnecessary conversations, he throws out a dismissive, "Then I'll be going," with a slight grin. His defiant gesture leaves his opponents dumbfounded by such impudence. Pelago Lionheart watches the boy leave with amazement, not believing his own eyes. The bewilderment on the competitors' faces gives way to complete confusion. Meanwhile, twilight thickens outside the windows of the majestic estate, heralding the beginning of a grand battle. Lord Lionheart raises his blade in a lightning-fast stance, ready to reveal all of its hidden power. Lord Lionheart slices through the air with his blade, demonstrating flawless precision in every movement. His gaze is focused, and his body radiates the confidence of a young heir to a great family. Each swing is filled with hidden power, capable of crushing any obstacle in its path. Suddenly, a sharp rustling sound interrupts the training. Uninvited guests are watching the young man from the shadows. Diner Lionheart and his companion appear in the courtyard, drawn by the sounds of battle. Lord Lionheart pauses for a moment, feeling the scrutiny of his elders. Diner Lionheart's muscular figure commands involuntary respect with its power. They approach slowly, but each of their steps echoes heavily in the silence of the evening. Diner Lionheart stops in front of the boy, and the tension between them could be cut with a knife. In one swift movement, he rips off his clothes, revealing an incredible, indestructible physique. Batch after batch, the muscles contract, revealing to the world the result of titanic training. He beats his chest with a proud roar, ready to demonstrate all his primal power. Sparkling skin and perfectly defined muscles make those around them freeze in amazement. Lord Lionheart's eyes widen in shock, not believing the absurdity that is happening. Could this old man really have decided to measure his strength against him in such an eccentric way? Diner Lionheart's companion looks at what is happening in bewilderment, not understanding the elder's motives. Her piercing gaze expresses genuine confusion in the face of such a strange sight. She turns her gaze to Lord Lionheart and asks a reasonable question about his choice of weapon. The young man stands confused between the two fighters, not knowing how to react to the circus. Both martial artists freeze in ostentatious poses, turning a serious training session into a comical performance. The training weapon whistles through the night air, spinning in the hands of Gamel Dinas. Gargus Lionheart, with a serious expression, shows off his sculpted muscles, frozen in a pathetic pose. The young warrior confidently grasps the shaft, preparing himself for the upcoming battle. The enemy, with a predatory grin, twirls the spear in her hands, inviting him to fight. Gamel Dinas casts a skeptical glance at his partner, mentally assessing her fighting skills. A predatory grin touches the lips of the young man, who is ablaze with excitement and anticipation. The opponent takes a low fighting stance, fully focusing on the enemy. Gamel Dinas raises his weapon, accepting the challenge and closing the distance with lightning speed. Suddenly, Diner Lionheart bursts between them, claiming his right to referee the fight. The elder raises his hand dramatically, demanding absolute honesty in the upcoming sparring match. Gamel Dinas mentally compares the eccentric old man with the mad moron Ruhr. The ultra-pretentious atmosphere reaches its peak as the opponents take up positions. The young man loses patience and rudely interrupts the protracted comedy, demanding that the fight begin immediately. The opponent jumps into action with lightning speed, moving from words to deeds. Her burning eyes express genuine rage and determination to crush the enemy. Diner Lionheart gives the start with a loud shout, laying down brutal rules: whoever strikes first wins. A sudden fright strikes the rival when the situation begins to get out of control. A heavy aura envelops the space around the clashing fighters. Gamel Dinas immediately seizes the initiative, demonstrating incredible reactions and technique. Good. With a slight smile on her lips, she sets the tone for this duel, making it clear that no one intends to retreat. Her gaze fills with fierce determination, and her muscles tense before a crushing jerk. A powerful push, and the fighters are close in the blink of an eye, breaking the silence of the training ground with a battle cry. The ground trembles beneath their feet as they come face to face, exchanging the first heavy blows. Every movement is imbued with frantic energy, and in their eyes one can see only the thirst for victory. Wooden shafts collide in the air with terrible force, striking out sheaves of sparks accompanied by dull blows. The powerful confrontation takes your breath away, and the girl's face is distorted with tension and dull pain. A hail of blows falls upon the opponent like a devastating storm, causing the air to hum with tension. Dinar Lionheart calmly analyzes the situation, admitting that her sheer physical fitness commands genuine respect. However, he retains superiority in experience and technique, and the outcome of the fight is predetermined. His weapon cuts through the air with deadly precision, imposing harsh rules of the game on his opponent. But at the most critical moment, the graceful lunge goes into the milk, leaving only a mark on the stone. The opponent playfully brushes off the miss, infuriating her with his unacceptable carelessness. Inside her, everything boils with indignation. How dare he parry absolutely everything without even trying to dodge? Like a spring that has been released from its safety catch, she rushes into the attack again, putting all her accumulated anger into the blow. The collision speed reaches its limit, turning into a mad whirlwind of intertwined spears. And just when it seems like the breaking point has been reached, he once again masterfully avoids a direct confrontation. A flash of rage gives way to a predatory grin. Excitement prevails over disappointment. Another lightning-fast attack makes the space around them shake from the sound wave. He easily absorbs the momentum of the blow, demonstrating absolute superiority in this deadly dance. Another lightning-fast attack makes the space around them shake from the sound wave. He easily absorbs the momentum of the blow, demonstrating absolute superiority in this deadly dance. Despite the fury of his attacks, his opponents are once again thrown back. Tensions are running high on the training ground as Gargus Lionheart watches on with a cool head. Gargus Lionheart is clearly unhappy with the way this fight is going, demanding their full commitment. However, everything soon changes when Gargus Lionheart suddenly changes his tone and declares the need to join forces. Dinar Lionheart, awakened by such strange speeches, looks with bewilderment at the uninvited guest in his room. A sleepy and irritated Dinar Lionheart immediately becomes indignant, demanding to know why he had to be woken up in the middle of the night. Gargus Lionheart is adamant. He wants a clear answer, and he is not going to back down. Dinar Lionheart is skeptical about the rules of the test, where everyone goes their own way, sincerely not understanding the scale of this crazy undertaking. But Gargus Lionheart had already calculated everything. Their goal was to break through to the very center of the labyrinth and come face to face with the main monster. Meanwhile, even the twins decide to follow this example, combining their hidden ambitions. Dinar Lionheart is refining the details of this daring plan, still weighing the pros and cons. However, Dinar Lionheart immediately brushes off the tempting offers, declaring that he is quite capable of handling everything alone, and calls the idea complete nonsense. Despite the barbs, Gargus Lionheart patiently awaits the decision, arms crossed over his chest. Dinar Lionheart, even in his thoughts, acknowledges the power of this madman, but ambition takes its toll. Gargus Lionheart does not hide his surprise at such a sharp refusal, trying to reach the stubborn man's mind. Dinar Lionheart abruptly cuts off all persuasion, demanding to know why such a manic obsession suddenly arose. A confident Gargus Lionheart continues to insist, convincing them that their combined strength is enough for victory. Gargus Lionheart throws down his trump card, recalling the long-standing rivalry and the opportunity to finally defeat the main branch of the family. Young Lord Lionheart studies the situation carefully, weighing every step in his complex game. Meanwhile, in another wing of the castle, Carmen Lionheart silently contemplates the moonlit night landscape. In the silence of the room, secret plans and unexpected visits from high-ranking officials are discussed. Carmen Lionheart hides her face behind a fan as she listens to news of the arrival of an influential mage from Aros's tower. Memories flash back to the young Lord Lionheart, who delved into the forbidden mysteries of magic with astonishing tenacity. The young man's detached gaze turns to determination when his loyal comrades appear nearby. Carmen Lionheart frowns, realizing that all plans could be ruined by an insidious ritual. Those around her tensely follow her every move, waiting for the final word. Carmen Lionheart confidently takes the initiative, uniting ambitious heirs around her. With a smooth movement of her hand, Carmen Lionheart readies her hidden weapon. Her thoughts are full of anger and irritation at the impudent rivals who are trying to get ahead of her. Lord Lionheart rises above the situation with a victorious grin, tasting the taste of near triumph. A mysterious shining portal opens before the young heroes, leading into the unknown. All members of the clan gather at the entrance, ready to take a step beyond the familiar world. The test leader fills the space with the blinding power of his magic. Streams of pure energy explode around, awakening the hidden potential of the ancient place. Malkit El-Haya and the other participants immediately respond to the call of the elements. Energy weaves in the hands of each fighter, taking on bizarre and dangerous shapes. The mentor gives clear instructions, requiring the visualization of a weapon made of purest light. Tensions reach fever pitch as inexperienced fighters try to control unruly magic. Sparkling blades obediently fall into the hands of the recruits, embodying the strength of their will. The young fighters are filled with delight, as magic has finally obeyed their call. A loud whistle cuts through the air as they try out their new weapons. But then childish questions arise about the durability of such an unusual arsenal. The mentor explains that a sword made of pure energy is almost indestructible. The boys wonder if it is possible to summon a living creature, but they receive a firm refusal. Magic is subject to strict laws, and the creation of new life is beyond the power of mortals. The young mind clings to this limitation, sincerely amazed at the grandeur of the universe. Meanwhile, the next fighter confidently materializes a heavy sword. He proudly displays a weapon that is an exact replica of his favorite training toy. Another participant summons an elegant spear, ready for any challenge. Another student smiles as he admires his flawless light blade, and only in some people does the magic spark unstably, causing them to anxiously grip the handle. The rest of the group also cope with the task, albeit with a little anxiety. Gargus Lionheart confidently creates a shield in addition to his sword, demonstrating excellent concentration. Suddenly, an unexpected intrigue flares up between the future comrades. The naive question makes the young student blink her eyes in confusion. Daner Lionheart appears, reminding everyone that there is no place for childish grievances in the labyrinths, as fierce competition is the key to survival. A wise elder with a fatherly smile urges us to remember team spirit. But behind the resounding words about the unity of the Lionheart family lies the heavy tread of coming trials. Melkite El-Haya, with a mysterious smile, presents the young warriors with strange artifacts. However, young Lord Lionheart feels out of place, looking suspiciously at the equipment he was given. The test leader shows off a shining pendant and explains safety rules. She personally distributes magical pendants to each participant lined up awaiting orders. Special amulets are linked to the mental state and will react if the stress level exceeds the permissible limit. The girl adds with strict confidence that she will personally intervene if the situation gets out of control. Lord Lionheart frowns in disbelief, wondering if this is overcautiousness. She also explains that in case of complete hopelessness, you can give a prearranged signal and leave the danger zone. The magical portal opens its ominous, shining gates before the frozen airs. The test manager grins ominously. There is only one entrance for everyone, but each has their own destiny. The young members of the noble family confidently move towards the threshold of the unknown, clutching their newly acquired weapons in their hands. Melkite El-Haya bids them farewell with a ringing wish of good luck just before they plunge into the abyss. The portal's energy consumes Lord Lionheart, pulling him into the depths of the shimmering mist. A heavy step echoes dully on the cold stone floor of the ancient dungeon. Finding himself inside a dark labyrinth, the young man looks around in search of a threat. The gloomy corridors come alive in his memory. In a past life, he had to go through many similar trials. He lifts his chin proudly, confident in the superiority of his rich experience. A sharp thrust of the blade cuts through the silence of the damp walls, demonstrating honed dexterity. The narrow corridor vaults leave no room for swinging, making long weapons useless. That is why the choice fell on a universal combination of sword and shield, ideal for these walls. Lord Lionheart is confident that the children's labyrinth will not be an obstacle for him. Step by step, he moves forward, holding tightly in his hands a short sword and a reliable shield. However, homemade traps await travelers in the most unexpected places. Slugs suddenly attack from ambush, catching the novice fighter off guard. Panic paralyzes the movements, and the protective artifact is destroyed with a crash from the impact. At this critical moment, Carmen Lionheart quickly comes to the rescue. The instant reaction of an experienced fighter saves the situation, driving the opponents away. Hard trials leave a deep mark on the hearts of young students. Stern Gillard Lionheart watches over them with unyielding severity. His commanding voice sounds like a sentence that brooks no argument. Tears of despair and resentment well up in the eyes of the cadets. A test for each candidate unfolds on the magical screens. Experienced mentors closely monitor the progress of the test. Meanwhile, Nathan Lionheart demonstrates truly monstrous physical strength. His massive two-handed sword cuts through the air with incredible speed. Every swing of this titan is filled with crushing power. The blow hits the stone wall directly, creating a shower of sparks. The goblins grin wickedly, hoping to trap the veteran. Nathan's furious scream echoes throughout the dungeon, causing the enemies to shudder. A powerful circular attack that instantly destroys all monsters in its path. Each swing of his blade cuts through the air with a deafening whistle. Without the slightest effort, he deals with the opponents blocking his path. In his hands, the formidable spear comes to life, turning into a deadly whirlwind. He moves with lightning speed across the stone slabs, not giving his enemies time to come to their senses. His swift attacks merge into a single continuous dance of steel and magic. A powerful backhand blow sends another monster into a deep knockout. Fighting with the spear against the nimble slimes is no easy task, but he knows how to choose his moment. With a deft jump, he closes the distance, avoiding a counterattack. His sharp mind and innate intuition have never failed him. Next, Sion enters the fight, confidently clutching a naked sword in his hand. He carefully studies the dark corridors, looking for hidden threats. Having studied the blueprints of countless labyrinths, they developed an impeccable tactic in advance. Dropping to one knee, he picks up a small stone from the floor. A precise throw causes the foreign object to whistle through the silence of the dungeon. At the same second, deadly arrows fly out of the walls with a roar, piercing the stone. Although Sion may be overly cautious at times, this is what saves him from certain death. Suddenly, an enraged goblin with 2 daggers materializes from the darkness. He freezes in a fighting stance, ready to repel any threat. The monster lets out a piercing screech and rushes to attack, raising its weapon above its head. With a graceful dodge, he avoids a crushing blow, turning the opponent's agility against him. The young swordsman's movements are striking in their swiftness and inexorable force. The blade cuts through the air, leaving behind bright sparks and traces of pure magic. Every step he takes is filled with confidence and unwavering determination. The silhouette of a young man confidently moves forward through the gloom of the ancient walls. But despite all his fighting might, in everyday life he sometimes behaves surprisingly naively. However, young Lord Lionheart is a master of the blade, defending himself from any threat. In a moment, he freezes in the face of danger, assessing his opponent. The sinister goblin bares his teeth, preparing for a furious attack. Genuine surprise gives way to fighting spirit on the young warrior's face. The battle cry sounds and the fight begins with renewed vigor. Steel meets steel in a hail of blinding sparks. A powerful lunge ends the fight with a lightning-fast blow that knocks down the enemy. A flash of victory illuminates the dim corridor, marking triumph. Lord Lionheart's face lights up with a joyful smile after a successful test. The young man watches what is happening from the sidelines, immersed in his own thoughts. Gillard Lionheart speaks leisurely about the past of his gifted descendant. Carmen Lionheart listens with interest to the elder's story about the fate of the heir. Gillard Lionheart adds that the young man had to give up his hobby for the sake of his family. Carmen Lionheart acknowledges the complexity of the path to becoming a true master. Gillard Lionheart suggests channeling this hidden potential in the right direction. Melkite El-Haya thoughtfully puts his finger to his lips, weighing every word of his interlocutor. She agrees to accept the young man into the tower for the sake of an old friend, but warns that his talents must meet her high standards. Gillard Lionheart just smiles softly, assuring him that he is not forcing him to do anything, because he only wants to help his grandson fulfill his cherished dream. The patriarch recalls with a sigh how even the heir to the great Vermouth himself was suddenly filled with deep respect for the wise sorceress. Melkith readily shares this admiration, admitting that in the chronicles of heroic campaigns she was always more attracted to the triumphs of Lady Sienne. She enthusiastically notes how skillfully she found a way out of any deadly trap thanks to her magical genius. Gillard nods knowingly, confirming that legendary tales do indeed captivate from a very young age. However, the elder unexpectedly admits that in his own heart, a completely different hero of antiquity has always occupied a special place. Melkith asks with genuine interest who could have eclipsed the legendary magician and warrior for him. Gillard squints slyly, about to reveal the name of the one whose image has sunk into his soul more than others. But at that moment his gaze falls on something incredible, forcing him to abruptly cut off his sentence and point out to his companion what was happening. Melkith watches his gesture in bewilderment, trying to understand what could have so shocked the seasoned veteran. Before their eyes, a spectacle from the past unfolds. A young man with a sword and shield fearlessly walks towards an enraged monster. His figure exudes a strange, precocious confidence, in which one can sense the steel hardening. A huge orc unleashes a crushing blow on the daredevil, capable of splitting a rock. But the young man meets the monstrous power face to face, masterfully repelling the onslaught with his heavy shield. A powerful shockwave shatters the surroundings into pieces, causing the space to shake from resonance. The mentors freeze in absolute stupor, not believing their own eyes and trying to comprehend the scale of the force before them. Gillard whispers words of amazement, realizing that the boy has exceeded all expectations. The young fighter calmly cuts through the enemy, leaving the defeated monster behind and confirming his right to his own legend. Watching the trial through the magical gates, the clan elders do not hide their keen interest in what is happening in the arena. Gilward, with a satisfied smile, notes the incredible composure and endurance of the young fighter in the fight with the deadly monster. However, Carmen Lionheart frowns, reminding them that these creatures are not designed for direct confrontation, but rather to find cunning workarounds. However, the elder cannot hide his amazement in the face of such a colossal and unexpected superiority. Carmen crosses her arms over her chest, thoughtfully considering what the rapid growth of this young talent will lead to. Great images of the past flash in my memory, as if anticipating the emergence of a new legendary hero. The monster's huge green paw comes crashing down, but Gamel Dinas meets the blow with incredible resilience. Sparks fly from the collision as the wounded warrior blocks the giant's crushing attack. With a sharp maneuver, Gamel Dinas dodges the blow, causing the monster to powerlessly smash the stone floor. The earth shakes from the crushing roar, and the warrior is already preparing for another lightning-fast attack. The monster looms over him like a gloomy rock, trying to crush him with its primal rage. But Gamel Dinas puts all his remaining pain and rage into his battle cry, gathering his last strength. He makes a swift dash forward, closing the distance under the enemy's massive fist. A sharp blade cuts through the air, leaving behind a shining trail of magical energy. The monster loses its balance, choking on streams of poisonous blood under a hail of merciless blows. Using incredible acrobatics, the young fighter literally soars up the enemy's gigantic body. Every swing of the sword cuts off any escape routes for the maddened monster. The final blow pierces the monster's flesh, causing a deafening roar of pain. The huge hand lifelessly unclenches its fingers, falling onto the cracked stone of the arena. Asmation, months more of year. Instead of celebrating his victory, the hero sank heavily to the spot, barely holding the blade thrust into the defeated enemy. The legs give way, and the strength quickly leaves the wounded body, turning every breath into torture. The face contorts in pain as the accumulated damage and fatigue finally take their toll. A flash of internal energy erupts, causing him to throw his hands up to the sky in despair. Unable to withstand the overload, it crashes onto the stone floor with a roar, accompanied by the crackle of scattered magic. For a moment, he lies motionless among the sparks, collecting the remaining crumbs of will bit by bit. With difficulty, the fighter rises and clutches his bleeding chest, recognizing the monstrous strength of the opponents in this labyrinth. Stumbling and dragging his heavy sword behind him, he takes a few more steps in an ominous silence. His strength finally leaves him, and the blade falls with a ringing sound next to his limply collapsed body. Meanwhile, the giant monster frowns with displeasure, feeling slightly irritated by what is happening. But for another warrior, this monster is just an annoying obstacle on the way to his cherished goal. Having assessed the situation, he deftly picks up an ordinary pebble from the floor and easily throws it straight at the enemy's back. The blow hits home, causing the massive beast to turn around sharply and in surprise. The huge carcass freezes in bewilderment, not understanding who dared to disturb its peace. Seizing the moment, the nimble fighter slips from behind, giving his opponent a sly and daring grin. Suddenly, a joyful cry is heard, and a familiar figure appears before him, eyes shining with delight. Sale immediately responds to the call, and a genuine smile of relief spreads across the boy's face. Finally, they are reunited in the middle of the dark corridors, having each overcome their own path in the labyrinth. The pleased commander takes the initiative, promising to lead them to the exit, while his companion enthusiastically supports the plan. Memories of the nightmare they experienced make the heroes shudder, as their encounter with the true horrors of the dungeon left an indelible mark. Clenching his fists until his joints hurt, the young man vows to wash away the shame of the past at all costs. Turning to his companion, he was perplexed to notice her strange animation. Seal blinked his eyes in confusion, trying to understand the reason for the sudden joy. But the guy already feels a pang of wounded pride and breaks out in a cold sweat from embarrassment. He is irritated by frivolous banter, because the danger around him is more than real. Taking a determined step forward, he gripped the hilt of his sword, ready to demonstrate all his prowess. At that very moment, a terrible, bloody face emerges from the darkness, making the blood run cold. Out of sudden horror, the young man lets out a deafening, piercing scream. The booming echo of the dungeon picks up their synchronized, frightened cries, merging into a single cacophony. Fighting back his panic, he points a trembling finger towards the nightmarish vision. The girl, no less frightened than the others, makes excuses, citing the suddenness of the stranger's cry. They freeze in their fighting stances, looking around in search of the source of the new threat. Mentally cursing the thwarted ambush, the uninvited guest grits her teeth in frustration. With a sharp movement, she grabs her weapon and suddenly runs away down the dark corridor. Ciel points after his fleeing opponent with excitement in his eyes, urging her not to let go of her prey. Seeing his target slipping away, the young man realizes that he again looks ridiculous in front of his companion. Filled with rage and hurt pride, he gives vent to his anger. Ciel, flushed with anger, screamed and rushed off in pursuit of the mysterious fugitive. The couple rushes in sync through the stone labyrinth, catching up with the frightened enemy. As she runs, the irritated pursuer mentally curses the clumsy Gargus Lionheart, who is stuck somewhere behind. The couple rushes in sync through the stone labyrinth, catching up with the frightened enemy. As she runs, the irritated pursuer mentally curses the clumsy Gargus Lionheart, who is stuck somewhere behind. Malkith Elhaya falls to the cold floor, knocked down by the sudden blow. The early fugitive throws her head back in horror, trying to comprehend the scale of the disaster. She rushes forward, jumping over cracks in the floor under a hail of stone debris. Kama suddenly freezes, his face distorted with horror as he realizes the terrible truth. The frantic pace leaves no time for reflection, and the brave warrior throws herself into the thick of destruction. The screech of cutting air announces a new danger. The pursuing trio is hot on their heels. Lord Lionheart assesses the situation on the fly, frantically trying to figure out how to overcome the insurmountable gap. The blonde pursuer, with an enthusiastic smile, catches up with her hesitant opponent. However, at that moment, a cold determination flashed in Lord Lionheart's eyes. He's not going to hold back any longer. It's time to show his true power. Powerful streams of magic envelop the young man in a blinding bluish flame. He takes off, turning into a blurry blue lightning bolt that cuts through the darkness of the dungeon. Each step is followed by a powerful explosion of energy, forcing opponents to dodge and panic. Soaring into the air, Lord Lionheart clears the deadly gap in an instant. A furious momentum carries him onto solid rock, where he immediately gives an order to his ally. Malkith Elhaya deftly soars over the abyss, easily following the gust of magic. Landing gracefully next to her comrade, she proudly accepts the praise. Teamwork pays off, and the duo, elated by success, sets off in pursuit. The smug Lord Honan only smiles slyly, noticing the uninvited guests. However, the young aristocrat is not at all surprised by the appearance of rivals in the depths of the dungeon. The opposing team immediately demands an explanation, but Lod merely maintains an imperturbable appearance. Suddenly, tension rises as a battered and blood-stained Malkith Elhaya emerges from the shadows. She demands an answer with fervor. Has Hunan finally decided to join forces against the main monster? However, Lod dismisses her words with condescension, like a capricious child. He states that he could easily deal with the monster alone, but decided to show nobility. The opponents freeze at the audacity of such a statement, and the young swordsman clenches his fists in anger. Lod casually points to the massive figure of the demonic beast lurking nearby. He explains the rules of his game. The monster waits silently until someone crosses an invisible line, and the order of the battle will strictly correspond to the order in which the opponents arrived here. Malkith is almost speechless at such cynicism, overcome with righteous indignation, but Lod continues to shower her with ridicule, caustically noting her shabby and pitiful appearance. Malkith grabs the piece of torn fabric in a rage, ready to break free from the chain. She furiously ties her hair with a ribbon, preparing herself for a brutal fight. And he steps forward resolutely, clutching a spear in his hands with cold fury in his eyes. At this point, the young swordsman challenges Lord Hunan himself, inquiring about his plans. Lod confidently declares that he will be the last one to enter the battle. The opponent immediately takes up the challenge, declaring that he will deal with the main monster himself. The cunning Hunan instantly changes tactics and promises to recognize him as an older brother if he really succeeds. The young man's thoughts return to the classic threats of the dungeons, the ferocious and unchanging minotaur. Unlike the mad trolls or bloodthirsty ogres, these beast-like giants are rational and do not attack everyone they meet. Therefore, Gamel sincerely believes that he will be able to deal with this enemy without unnecessary losses. From the dark depths of the labyrinth emerges a gigantic figure clad in gold and muscle. The monstrous beast towers over the arena, displaying absolute dominance and cold, terrifying power. Mamkit rips the shaft of his war spear, feeling the tension building in the air. She frantically thinks about how exactly she will have to fight this walking mountain of muscles. But it's too late to retreat. There is no way back, and we must go to the end. With a desperate cry, she breaks away from the spot, turning into white lightning. Using a swift maneuver, Mamkit leaps into the air, preparing to deliver a devastating blow. The monster's huge, heavy foot crashes to the ground, nearly crushing the impudent girl. But she dodges with lightning speed, bouncing off the walls and continuing her deadly dance. A second to aim, and the spear tip is aimed straight at the enemy's vulnerable spot. There is a dull thud, but the tip only strikes sparks from the powerful armor. Mamkit's eyes widen in horror. Her weapon was powerless against the monster's impenetrable skin. With one swing of his massive hand, the Minotaur brushes away the annoying opponent like a pesky fly. Pain pierces her entire body, causing her to gasp in stinging humiliation. A powerful blow throws Mamkit far back, leaving him lying exhausted on the cold stone floor. The comrades silently watch their fallen ally, not understanding the monster's logic. Gamal looks at the beast in bewilderment, wondering why it didn't even try to finish off the defeated enemy. Himal declares with cold confidence that they are not facing a real enemy at all. Lod steps forward, intercepting the sword with a predatory grin. Now it's his turn to show himself. Gimal crosses his arms over his chest, looking at his opponent appraisingly and slightly condescendingly. His face lights up with a wide, almost crazy smile, full of anticipation of imminent victory. Lod grits his teeth, irritated that anyone dares to doubt his abilities. He concentrates his internal energy, enveloping himself and the blade in blazing blue flames. A bright glow reflects off the steel as the boy pours all his power into the weapon. The power surges, causing the air to tremble with a powerful release of energy. The discouraged comrade stands frozen on the floor, unable to believe his own eyes. Inside him, everything boils with humiliation. Is the gap between them and the main branch really so insurmountable? Lod raises his blade, filling it with magical radiance again in hopes of correcting his mistake. But at the most crucial moment, the magic dissipates with a pitiful sound, leaving only drops of fading power. The guy freezes in shock, looking at the unarmed blade and not understanding where its power went. The stern teachings of elders that true greatness does not depend on origin come to mind. After all, in the veins of every true warrior flows the will of a legendary hero, erasing the boundaries between clans. Lod looks at his own blade in fury, trying to understand why his magic is failing once again. There is an enthusiastic whisper behind him, and his partner's mocking look only adds fuel to the fire. Anger clouds the boy's eyes, causing him to clench his teeth until they creak in impotent rage. Does this fool really think he can't deal with the enemy without magic? A huge, horned monster looms sternly over the battlefield, ready to repel any attack. The beast's powerful blow cuts through the air, but the target escapes at the very last moment. A giant paw whistles past, raising clouds of stone chips. Gamaldinus closes the distance sharply, delivering a swift slash to the armored limb. Every lightning-fast maneuver is difficult, but the fury in the young man's eyes does not fade for a second. Another crushing blow from the beast almost slams the fighter into the cold stone wall. As if dancing on the brink of death, he again evades the attack, leaving new marks on the monster's paw. My breathing is ragged, but I have a clear plan in my head to break through the defense and deliver the decisive blow. Every movement is carefully calculated, because the price of error here is too high. A sudden attack causes the fighter to jump back under a hail of debris. The monstrous grip catches him by surprise, depriving him of the opportunity to maneuver. The swing of a giant hand cuts through space with such force that it takes your breath away. The inertia throws the warrior back, causing him to fly out of the danger zone with a scream. A clever somersault allows you to soften your fall and instantly return to your fighting stance. While this madness continues, the spectators of this scene maintain a surprising composure. Pain pierces his body, but Gamaldinus only clenches his teeth tighter, suppressing a groan. One of the observers steps aside, leaving his comrade alone with the problem. The girl categorically refuses to tempt fate in this place. An appraising glance glides over the setting with silent approval. Soon, attention is drawn to the equipment abandoned near the wall, waiting for its moment. The hand confidently lifts the heavy shield, testing its strength before the next stage of the test. The baby confidently strides towards the gigantic threat, causing everyone around him to freeze in tension. With a slight grin, he turns around, assessing the situation with frightening composure. The teammates stood frozen to the side, watching the crazy plan in horror. A predatory passion flashes in his eyes, and an anticipatory smile plays on his lips. A monstrous Goliath towers over him like a rock, ready to crush the daring daredevil. The small figure freezes at the very feet of the giant, contrasting with his colossal strength. He raises the blade, mentally wondering which side would be best to approach this mass of muscle. A huge fist cuts through the air, but the target slips away at the very last moment. A lightning-fast dash carries the fighter closer to the target, leaving behind a swirling cloud of dust. He easily climbs up the giant's arm, using his own strength against him. Another giant palm tries to grab the insolent one, but he is again one step ahead. The air shakes from the force of the miss, and the dexterous acrobat is already rushing on. Once on the beast's head, he instantly closes the distance for a decisive maneuver. The giant swings with all his might, trying to crush the impudent pest. A blinding flash of impact illuminates the arena as the blow lands squarely on the top of the monster's head. The Colossus, driven mad by pain, lets out a deafening roar, losing control of the situation. The nimble fighter secures himself on the armored collar, waiting for the right moment to counterattack. A flash of rage makes him rush forward again, gritting his teeth with overwhelming energy. A series of blinding blows cuts through space, unleashing a hail of deadly attacks on the enemy. Spectators are left speechless and amazed as they watch the incredible acrobatics on the battlefield. Each blow is measured with frightening precision, aimed squarely at the vulnerable carotid artery. In the blink of an eye, the fighter closes the distance, turning into a blur of blue lightning. The blade cuts through the air, leaving behind a bright trail of destructive energy. A powerful thrust lands directly on the giant monster's throat, causing the beast to shudder. Losing its balance, the Colossus begins to fall backwards under a spray of poisonous green blood. The heady carcass crashes onto the stone floor, raising thick clouds of dust. The winner calmly shakes off the remaining alien slime from the blade. His sword and armor are stained with the victorious green juice of the defeated enemy. The rest of the group members stand frozen in complete stupor, unable to believe their own eyes. The faces of the companions show absolute shock at the massacre they witnessed. With a victorious grin on his face, the fighter declares that the enemy is completely defeated. His teammates look at him silently, still processing what happened. One of them clenches his fists convulsively, trying to comprehend the scale of the other's superiority. The triumphant hero himself talks about how much simpler everything would be if there were magic. The allies' thoughts are filled with awe and recognition. He himself could never cope with such speed. A strange, previously unfamiliar feeling of burning delight suddenly rises in my chest. The heart begins to beat with incredible force, responding to the overwhelming internal excitement. At that moment, his own weapons and palms flash with a blinding golden glow. The huge silhouette of the defeated monster dissolves in streams of bright magical energy. The shocked companions silently watch the fading sparks of the great victory. The completion of the test marks a new chapter filled with quiet trepidation. Golden magical particles disperse into the air, dissolving in the rays of the setting sun. Gillard Lionheart grins contentedly as he watches the results of this grand experiment. The old patriarch smiles at the incredible tenacity of the boy, who comes from a collateral branch of the family. Lord Lionheart listens attentively to his elder, arms folded, considering the prospects that lie ahead. However, the interlocutor's face was clouded by a shadow of doubt. It seemed impossible to overcome such a threat alone. After all, this artificial minotaur was not created for an easy victory, but to test team cohesion. The tension mounts, causing one to question the fairness of the trials that have been arranged. And the predatory gleam in Gillard Lionheart's eyes betrays his deep personal interest in what is happening. Memories take those present back to the days when the young rebel first set foot on the threshold of their estate. His frantic training on the training ground shocked all the staff from the very first day. Gillard Lionheart's eyes light up with pride at this unexpectedly discovered gem. Yet Lod cannot suppress the troubling question about the future of the entire family. After all, the daring youth already surpasses in strength the legitimate heirs of the great house. Gillard Lionheart merely waves the matter off with a careless wave of his hand, not at all afraid of such an outcome. His sharp gaze pierces his interlocutor, causing him to freeze under the weight of his authority. For him, the law is simple. Only the strongest is worthy of bearing the name Lionheart and leading the rest. If the blood heirs prove too weak to hold on to power, they will sign their own death warrant. Only a fool would cling to traditions that could destroy a great family from within. Lod lowers his head, stunned by the clan leader's ruthless and pragmatic philosophy. Laud pauses, processing what he has just heard, while Gillard Leonhardt remains unperturbed. Laud chooses his words carefully, offering the elder an unexpected way out of the current situation. Gillard Leonhardt frowned in disbelief at the bold idea of possible adoption. Laud develops the idea, pointing to a dangerous precedent. A youth from a side branch playfully surpassed the heirs of the blood. If left unchecked, bastards and clan collaterals may openly challenge legitimate authority. Gillard Leonhardt weighs his allies' every word, recognizing a grain of truth in his devious plan. The patriarch touches his chin thoughtfully, agreeing that the idea of adoption sounds extremely tempting. But before deciding destinies, Gillard Leonhardt intends to personally take a look at those who have gone through this terrible ordeal. A group of emaciated Lionheart children emerges from the forest shadows, barely able to stand. They line up in front of the elders, feeling the weight of the stern gazes hanging over them. Gillard Leonhardt gives his young offspring a piercing look, assessing their condition after the labyrinth. Young Gamaldina stands with his head bowed, still overcome by the nightmare he experienced. The patriarch looks closely at the young man's face, looking for traces of the founder's great power. The other children stood frozen in tension, some with nervous smiles, others with fear in their eyes. Gillard Leonhardt smiles softly, breaking the awkward silence of the welcoming speech. The elder kindly announces that they have been closely monitoring every step of the test through magical spheres. Gillard Leonhardt addresses Gamaldinus directly, singling him out from the other participants. The young man nods reservedly, accepting the praise from the head of the great Leonhardt clan himself. The patriarch continues his triumphant speech, admiring how Gameldinas single-handedly defeated the ferocious troll. The tension mounts, and the rival standing next to the boys flinches from a sudden pang of envy and anger. A dull irritation grows among the young contenders. The envious glances of their peers are drowned out by bewilderment in the face of someone else's triumph. The imagination helpfully draws grotesque pictures of the incredible power inherent in the true heirs of the Lionheart blood. But Robert Serpis only smiles indulgently, noting how far these young men have surpassed his wildest expectations. The great power of the legendary vermouth truly flows through these veins, awakening genuine awe in observers. Patriarch Gillard Leonhardt smiles broadly as he heaps praise on the children, even though the celebration in their honor has yet to be organized. He gently orders Robert Serpis to send the boys off to a well-deserved rest. The other children obediently follow the guide, leaving the old man alone with his own plans. However, the wise patriarch suddenly stops his choice on Gamaldinus. The Mer freezes in surprise, his eyes wide in quiet amazement. Gillard kindly suggests that they not put things off and present the award immediately. Mer clasps her hands in a prayerful gesture, sadly remembering that the cherished gift remained hidden from her eyes. The children walk silently down the path, leaving them behind under the shade of spreading trees. The rays of the setting sun paint the treetops in the crimson and golden tones of the waning day. Gamaldinus walks a little behind, deep in thought. Gillard Leonhardt walks alongside, radiating an aura of absolute calm and confidence. The patriarch starts a conversation, noting the boy's amazing flexibility in handling a wide variety of weapons. Gillard gently corrects him, reminding him of the impressive arsenal he brought to bear against Sion and Dejira. Gamaldinus smiles to himself, fully aware that not a single detail will escape the clan leader's keen eye. Gillard's eyes light up with a strange gleam when he speaks of the main symbol of their great family, a majestic image of a warrior surrounded by a whole lieutenant of deadly weapons, whose spirit is timeless, flashes through my memory. Memory carefully preserves the image of Gameldinas, a great master of the blade, whose power was second only to the invincible vermouth. Eugene quietly clears his throat, recalling details from the legends he read as a child about Dumb Hamel. Gillard merely smiles good-naturedly, agreeing that without this daring warrior, the old chronicles would be incredibly boring. The patriarch, with warmth in his voice, admits that of all the heroes of antiquity, he always singled out Hamel. Eugene freezes in surprise, looking into the old man's face with genuine interest. His golden eyes widen in surprise. Could it be that the legendary warrior was more attractive to someone than the legendary founder? Gillard explains that against the backdrop of the impeccable vermouth, he seemed much closer and more human. After all, in the endless shadow of the great light, Gamel was ready to go to the end, overcoming any obstacles for the sake of victory. And at the end of this dramatic story, the great hero gave his life to save his comrades. Eugene puts his hand to his face thoughtfully, digesting the words he heard. Gillard suddenly turns around, noticing the sincere response in the young descendant's eyes. The boy's face lights up with a happy, shy smile, His declaration of love for the disgraced hero finds a response in his heart. The old patriarch squints slyly, approving of such an unexpected choice. They leave the alley and head towards a massive stone tower guarded by silent guards. Step by step, Eugene follows Gillard, feeling the growing tension of this moment. The heavy doors creak open, revealing a path into the mysterious shelter. They step onto the cold stone of the ancient floor, plunging into the semi-darkness of the monastery, closed off from prying eyes. The echo of their footsteps carries through the vaults of the gloomy corridor leading into the very depths of the tower. Plunging further down the stone stairs, they leave daylight behind. Gillard turns around encouragingly and says words that take Eugene's breath away. Apart from the heads of the family, no one living today has ever been honored to set foot in the family treasury. Eugene can hardly believe his ears, asking again if he is really allowed to enter such a sacred place. Gillard merely grins contentedly into his gray mustache, confirming that he has secured the support of the Senate elders. Behind the closed doors of the Lionheart Senate, secret decisions are being made that could change the fate of the entire clan. The patriarch explains that this sanctuary contains the relics of great ancestors whose fame resounds throughout the continent. Step by step, they descend the gloomy steps deeper into the bowels of the family castle. Suddenly, Eugene freezes with a daring guess and asks if the legendary sword itself is kept here. Gillard acknowledges this with a restrained smile, but then immediately sobers the young man up with harsh reality. The blade exudes a divine radiance, storing within itself the will of the hero himself. Eugene frowns skeptically, mentally doubting the old man's words. After all, after the glorious Vermouth Lionheart, no one has yet managed to subjugate this relic. The guy asks incredulously what this mysterious confession of the blade means. Gillard turns to him with the sly smile of an old schemer. Finally, they stop in front of a massive round door covered in ancient runes. The patriarch winces in pain, biting his finger hard to extract the sacrificial blood. He drops scarlet drops onto the golden mechanism, activating the ancient guard. The stone lion's mouth comes to life, flashing with an ominous, magical light. The mechanism begins to open the heavy gates of the vault with a heavy roar. Gillard gives his grandson an appraising look, checking his readiness. The patriarch stops at the threshold, generously inviting the young man to enter alone. He smiles softly, explaining that the presence of his elders will only hinder Eugene from making a sincere choice. Eugene bows his head respectfully, agreeing with the patriarch's wise proposal. Leaving his elders behind, the boy confidently walks towards the sacred altar. The heavy doors close behind him, leaving him alone with the ancient relics of the Lionheart family. A predatory smile blossoms on Eugene's lips. It's time to test one crazy guess. His gaze is drawn to the legendary sword shining in the center of the hall, emitting a blinding divine light. This weapon preserves the memory of the great triumphs of the past and the unbearable burden of bygone eras. Stretch his numb fingers, the young rebel braces himself for the challenge ahead. Memories helpfully paint a picture from a past life when the great Vermouth Lionheart crushed enemies with this blade. True, the bitter irony of fate was that after the victory over evil, the relic was used only as a banal torch. With a determined exhalation, Eugene kneels before the shining blade. A powerful jerk, and the fingers grip the handle until the joints hurt. "Come on, give in," flashes through the mind of the stubborn man who has put all his rage into this jerk. But a wave of alien magic pushes back the invader, causing him to recoil with a groan. Clutching his bruised wrist, Eugene realized with annoyance the stupidity of the idea. Even if the barrier had fallen, it would have been physically impossible to take this colossus with you. Rising from his knees, the boy continues his journey along the rows of ancient weapons. Suddenly, his gaze catches a familiar silhouette from the semi-darkness, causing him to freeze in surprise. This is that very blade that awakens the most vivid memories. The curved blade, resembling a snake's spine, seems to call out to its true owner. Images of fierce battles where this blade cut through the darkness itself instantly flash before my mind's eye. However, such a formidable weapon is not suitable for the young hero now. Among the treasures shines an indomitable attacking dragon spear, capable of rivaling the flames of the ancient lizards. Nearby floats the storm sword Vinid, holding the blessing of the wind spirit king himself. And the legendary bow of Fornoa is capable of striking a target with lightning speed anywhere in the world. Some blades are even capable of transforming into deadly whips under the will of the owner. Each exhibit in his treasure trove amazes the imagination with its unique power and history. Gemmel looks over the endless rows of artifacts, weighing the pros and cons. But a question naturally begins to arise in his head. Is this really all that remains of its former greatness? Where did the legendary Moonlight Sword and the once demon-slaying spear disappear to? 3 centuries later, descendants clearly tried to hide the best relics from prying eyes. Reflecting on the choice, Gamel returns again to the thought of the Sword of Vinid and the power of the elements. However, not every chosen magician is given the ability to master the art of summoning spirits. Suddenly, the guy's gaze catches something completely unexpected, hidden among the artifacts. The gaze catches strange things from the dim light, which at first glance seem like simple things. But among them, a familiar silhouette flashes, making the heart skip a beat. Is this really what he thinks? The guy suddenly raises his hand, as if grabbing an invisible thread of fate, and before his eyes, that very treasured pendant clearly flashes. Memories of the past come to life. Young Gamel, lamenting, then stands over the defeated enemy, Juan Bass. Bright memories of past victories and fallen comrades still warm Gamel's wounded soul. But what was his amazement when, among the treasures of the New World, he discovered her, that very family heirloom. Did Vermouth personally remove that pendant from his lifeless body after that fateful battle? The hero's thoughts feverishly return to those dark days when the very fate of the world hung in the balance. After all, back then they had joined forces with the Demon King of Imprisonment and stood shoulder to shoulder as true brothers in arms. Vermouth, Sanaya, Moron, Anus, they all took sacred vows in the face of eternity. So why is the heart now filled with the burning bitterness of betrayal? What was Vermouth thinking when he committed actions that crossed out all former trust? And it's not even that the great hero spared the Demon Kings, leaving them alive. Gamel is in no hurry to throw accusations at his comrades, believing that there were good reasons for this. But how can one explain the fact that his personal amulet was locked in his cold treasury? Gillard Lionheart, noticing the young heir's confusion, bows his head in bewilderment. However, the choice has already been made, and the boy, with a sincere smile, shows off the thing dear to his heart. The elder only spreads his hands, reminding them of the countless riches that lie around them. But for Gamel, this humble ruby is more valuable than any material goods in this world. Gillard carefully picks up the roughly cut stone, studying it with a professional squint. The old master immediately sees the simplicity of the work and the cheapness of the mineral, and is completely unimpressed by the find. But as soon as the pendant was brought to the Lionheart family pedestal, something incredible happened. The lion's stone mouth suddenly came to life, illuminating the dungeon with an ominous crimson glow. Gillard freezes in shock, realizing the strangeness of what is happening. This Artemon was not even listed in the official registers of the treasury. Gillard remarks doubtfully that this modest pendant is not worth a dime, but young Lionheart is adamant. The old man only sighs heavily, acknowledging the boy's right to this strange and inexplicable choice. However, Gillard decides to play it safe. The item must be handed over to Reborn for a thorough magical check. Eugene cautiously asks if he will be able to take the find back after all the examinations. Having received the patriarch's firm promise, the boy's face instantly changes. With a sly half-smile, Giard offers an unexpected deal. Since this pendant is not listed among the official family treasures, Eugene can choose something else for himself. The boy's eyes widen in surprise. Is he really allowed to take something valuable in return? The patriarch only squints slyly, allowing the young man to take whatever his soul desires. Without wasting a second, Eugene gives a polite bow and takes off with a cry of victory. Filled with jubilation, he rushes through the corridors of the estate, not believing his incredible luck. After all, in his hands now is the legendary sword Vinid, a relic that one could only dream of. Clearing the way for the blade, Eugene raises it towards the light, feeling the purest energy emanating from the steel. A bright glow fills the room as the young warrior triumphantly claims the blade as his own. Lionheart Manor is plunged into evening silence, hiding the birth of a new legend behind its high windows. The rays of the setting sun softly illuminate the ancient facades, while unexpected scenes unfold inside. Malkat El-Haya suddenly blocks Eugene's path, indignantly demanding an explanation. She points her finger emotionally at the guy, wondering why he ignored the spear that was perfect for him. Eugene merely lazily brushes off his interlocutor's attacks, declaring that he is no worse with a sword. In the background, there is a disgruntled grumbling, adding comicality to this heated argument. God and natural sin to the Daucus. As if not noticing the tension around him, the young lord thoughtfully touches his chin. He immediately begins to impose his views, authoritatively declaring that such power is best handled with a massive hammer or axe. Gargus Lionheart proudly shows off his sculpted muscles, inviting the boy to join their clan, but receives a categorical refusal. Malkat El-Haya quickly pushes away the annoying relative, trying to smooth over the awkwardness of the situation. Her golden eyes flash with righteous anger as she thwarts any attempt to impose her will. The owner of incredible power himself maintains an inscrutable expression on his face, remaining aloof from heated debates. His hand confidently rests on the hilt of the elegant blade, awakening the magical energy hidden within. The interlocutors look at the weapon that has appeared in surprise, demanding an explanation. The blade's owner explains that this is the legendary storm sword of Vinnet, blessed by the Wind Spirit King himself, and that in the future it will be able to summon spirits. The girl freezes in place, clenching her fists in awe. She is rapturously numb, trying to make out the elusive silhouettes of the aerial creatures. Malkith El-Haya immediately turns his attention to other relics, enthusiastically mentioning the fearsome dragon spear Carbos, which can sling fire like the ancient serpent. The guy just raises his eyebrows skeptically, admitting that he can't even imagine what this miracle of blacksmithing looks like. The interlocutor freezes in horror, recalling the most terrible artifact, the demonic spear Ruintos, which once belonged to the great Vermouth Lionheart. At this point, Malkith El-Haya can't take it anymore and gives her a resounding slap, saying that no one asked her opinion. The young man's cold gaze cuts through the gloom, foreshadowing an imminent storm. A flash of ominous energy fills the space, revealing the face of unspeakable horror. Heavy chains tighten with a strained clang, holding back the primordial darkness that is bursting out. In the dark crimson, the ominous silhouette of a third of the lords appears, the demon king of madness. And then, from the thick shadows, emerges the monumental figure of the fourth ruler, the merciless king of cruelty. And completing this terrifying pantheon is the ferocious king of slaughter. But Lord Lionheart cuts the argument short, declaring that true power lies not in titles. He points to an ancient artifact whose dark aura is capable of clouding the mind of any daredevil. However, his interlocutor fiercely insists on her own, asserting the superiority of the demonic spear over the other relics. The little ones continue their heated argument, not noticing how Gamaldinus appears nearby with a weapon at the ready. Gamaldinus looks thoughtfully at the ominous relics, arguing that such powerful blades are unlikely to gather dust in simple treasuries. The dispute flares up again, with mutual accusations and childish arguments about whose weapon is more deadly. Gamaldinus only sighed wearily, mentally admitting that he was already too old for such empty arguments. But the disputants do not calm down, continuing to prove to each other the superiority of the chosen relics. Meanwhile, Gamaldinus strides forward with concentration, tightly gripping the hilt of the cold blade. Before his eyes, the legendary moonlight sword flashes, the embodiment of destruction that has languished in demonic dungeons for centuries. Images of great lords come to life in his memory, the king of cruelty with his demonic spear and the king of slaughter, crushing everything in his path with a crushing hammer. He freezes in tense silence, feeling the breeze of a real combat weapon for the first time in his life. Those around freeze in shock, looking at each other with undisguised amazement on their faces. Gamaldinus lunges forward, cutting through the air with a shining crescent of energy. Every movement is imbued with deadly grace as he cuts through the darkness with blinding light. The blade traces intricate patterns in the darkness, harnessing the very elements of destruction. Energy waves spread out in all directions, causing the air to crackle with colossal tension. He abruptly changes his stance, putting all his accumulated power into the strike. A swift swing completes the blade's dance, leaving behind a shining trail of pure power. Eugene freezes in a perfect stance, letting the sword cut through the air with the elegance of a dance. Nathan Lionheart watches this flawless spectacle in amazement, not believing his own eyes. Malkith El-Haya stands frozen in complete amazement, amazed by the grace and power of this movement. In the spacious office, a much quieter but no less intense conversation unfolds. Malkith El-Haya studies the strange artifact clutched in her palm with intent. Her gaze is cold and calculating, and one can read in it the absolute confidence of a professional. Gilliard Lionheart carefully touches his finger to the mysterious pendant lying on the table in front of him. Malkith El-Haya looks closely at the patriarch, trying to unravel the true motives of this act. She asks with doubt in her voice whether this thing really comes from the family treasure. Gilliard Lionheart merely nods affirmatively, confirming the relic's authenticity. Malkith El-Haya can't help but be skeptical, wondering why the guy would even need this strange thing. Gilliard Lionheart smiles bitterly, noting that if the young man had been deprived of this choice, he would have been left with nothing at all. The girl nervously bites her lip, realizing the riskiness of this undertaking. She moves to the window, thinking over what she heard and deciding to double-check every detail. Malkith El-Haya bends over the artifact again, noting a strange feature. The pendant does not have any direct magical effect. But an experienced magician immediately notices the hidden mystery and asks in bewilderment, "How is this possible?" A predatory smile touches the corners of her lips as she reveals the secret. This method has its roots in the teachings of the wise Senna herself. In a world completely saturated with magic, there is hardly an object that does not bear the imprint of contact with it. Gilliard Lionheart frowns, but gives a clear signal. It's time to get down to business. Melkith El-Haya raises her hands above the pendant, igniting the sparks of an ancient spell. Malkith El-Haya stares intently at the artifact as a mystical glow breaks through the spell's weave. A flash of memory takes them back a whole century to when mysterious strangers first took possession of the thing. Melkith El-Haya captures fragments of other people's memories, depicting familiar streets of the capital from the past. But suddenly, the barrier of the treasury interrupts the vision, erasing any clues. Gilliard Lionheart thoughtfully twirls the ancient pendant in his hands, returning to reality. Malkith El-Haya looks at the patriarch with bewilderment, not fully understanding his plan. Gilliard Lionheart decides to give the find to Eugene because he was so desperate to get it. Malkith El-Haya couldn't help but smile, noticing how much the stubborn guy had gotten the better of the stern head of the family. Gilliard Lionheart responds with a sly smile that contains no small amount of warmth. With a sharp movement, he leans on the table, making an unexpected and bold decision. The patriarch's gaze falls on the window, behind which young Eugene stubbornly continues his training. Melkith El-Haya watches this scene, noticing the elder's sincere affection. Her mouth drops open in surprise when she hears the clan leader's ambitious plan, and Gilliard Lionheart, with a triumphant smile, declares his intention to elevate Eugene to the rank of true Lionheart. At this moment, Eugene is completely focused on his fighting stance, squeezing out all his strength. But as soon as the environment changed, the guy again broke into a carefree smile, greeting everyone around him. The sudden appearance of the guest takes Nina by surprise, causing her to scream in fear. Eugene becomes seriously tense when he realizes who exactly has honored them with their visit. This young man is Gian Lionheart himself, free from prejudice and traveling with Glade. Guion greets them with a slight smile, stating that he is well aware of Eugene's true origins. Gian immediately speaks to Eugene with a wide smile, mentioning his triumph in the blood ritual. Caught off guard, the guy instinctively moves away, trying to maintain at least some distance. However, the elder relative explains that he volunteered to escort him personally while his brother was preparing to send knights for him. His casual appearance and open smile are completely at odds with the clan's gloomy atmosphere. Gian sincerely regrets that he missed the blood rite, although he is well aware of the traditions. After all, according to the immutable rules, only the head of the family can observe this sacrament. True, this time, old Robarian was also nearby, observing the progress of the ritual. But Gian immediately brushes off these details, declaring that he does not hold any grudge against his brother. He doesn't give a damn about conventions and family prejudices. He lives exclusively by his own mind. However, this apparent carelessness makes Eugene wary. Carefully studying his interlocutor, the boy notices his wild energy and amazing freedom of manners. The opulent halls of the Lionheart mansion float past as they continue on their way. Gian casually discusses why exactly Glade might have summoned the young hero. Eugene coldly remarks that routine compliments are of little interest to him and that his eldest relative himself is clearly not aware of the leader's plans. With a slight grin, Gian admits that his deduction is clearly lacking today. In response to the prodding, Eugene agrees with this conclusion with a grin. They stop in front of the massive doors leading to the head's private quarters. Eugene knocks decisively on the heavy wood, feeling the elder's attentive gaze on him. A muffled, commanding voice from within allows them to enter. The doors swing open, opening the way to a new meeting. The young man's face lights up with a wide, sly smile, behind which lies a sharp, calculating mind. However, behind the apparent carelessness lies a slight tension because the interlocutor has too much influence. In a spacious office, flooded with bright daylight, the owner of the estate awaits a guest at a massive table. The young man's gaze falls on the exquisite treat, but his thoughts are occupied with something completely different. The patriarch smiles softly, apologizing for such a sudden summons. They take seats opposite each other in the silence of the luxurious living room. In one smooth movement, a mysterious pendant on a thin chain falls onto the table. Gilliard Lionheart clasps his hands, carefully studying his interlocutor's reaction. The young man leans forward, feeling the intrigue thickening. An experienced patriarch shares the results of a secret investigation conducted by magicians. The artifact's magical energy memory was studied, but, to the disappointment of those examining it, it did not hold any secrets. At this moment, the young man was overcome with a chilling shudder from an unexpected realization. Memory flashes back to days gone by and a mysterious companion holding a magical vessel in her hands. He asks his interlocutor directly about what exactly he managed to find out. Gillard Lionheart calmly reports that the item was purchased on the streets of the capital a full century ago. Horror flashed in the young man's eyes. The relic really did belong to a bygone era. But couldn't the powerful master read the artifact's true memory? Or did someone deliberately mislead the magic tower itself? Deep in thought, he frantically tries to find a way out of the dead-end investigation. Suddenly, a beaming smile lights up his face, and he cheekily asks if he can have the thing for himself. The cunning old man only smiles softly, as if spoiling his beloved grandson. The boy enthusiastically accepts the precious gift, not hiding his sincere, childish joy. He carefully hangs the amulet around his neck, admiring the enticing shine of the ruby. However, Diner Lionheart immediately changes his tone to a more serious and conspiratorial one. The patriarch hints that he has a proposal in store that could completely change the young man's fate. A wary understanding flickers in the teenager's golden eyes. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Diner Lionheart looks at his interlocutor carefully, choosing the most convincing words for his main goal. The young man crosses his arms over his chest, trying to guess the catch in this strange conversation in advance. A comical image of an ideal bride flashes through the guy's mind, who in reality turns out to be a skilled hypocrite. Diner Lionheart sits calmly and confidently, like an experienced hunter who has cornered his game. The boy quickly disavows any talk of marriage, citing his young age. But the experienced intriguer abruptly cuts off his excuses with a wet gesture of his hand. Diner Lionheart, with a slight panic in his voice, assures that he had no intention of marrying him to Seal. The teenager's face falls in absolute shock. He certainly didn't expect such a twist. Absurd pictures of a happy family life, accompanied by festive fireworks, are already flashing through his imagination. The boy's internal monologue is interrupted by the realization of his own mental instability. Has reincarnation really damaged his mind? Diner Lionheart lays his cards on the table and openly declares his desire to adopt Eugene. The stunned guy freezes, not believing his own ears. The thought that through adoption one can easily rise to the top of the main clan makes him narrow his eyes slyly. Sitting at a luxurious table, he digests the scale of the opening prospects, weighing the pros and cons. Lord Lionheart takes a step forward with a gentle smile, as if inviting the young man into the arms of a great family. He then cleverly adds that, if they wish, the clan can adopt Jihad himself. But Lord Lionheart only shakes his head reassuringly, assuring that the old way of life will simply dissolve in the greatness of their family. Lord Lionheart extends his hand with an open palm, promising to treat him as a brother. Lord Lionheart rises abruptly from his seat, looming over the table and attempting to overwhelm his interlocutor with force. Lord Lionheart walks around the table and leans against the back of the chair, continuing to push his line gently but firmly. Lord Lionheart leans closer, a threatening note creeping into his voice. Lord Lionheart's dazzling smile returns, instantly changing his tactic to a friendly one. Lord Lionheart shrugs, suggesting they postpone this difficult conversation until after the festivities. Lord Lionheart assures that he will personally send people for his father so that he can be present at the important event. Gillard Lionheart listens to the dialogue with undisguised interest, assessing what is happening. Gillard Lionheart watches the boy's reactions closely, noticing every detail of his behavior. The guy frowned, clearly thinking about what he had heard and not rushing to make blind promises. The kid feels the growing tension and looks at his influential relative with concern. The young man anxiously asks how his future will turn out after such tempting offers. With a slight nervousness in his voice, the guy asks a reasonable question about the fate of his father. The boy nervously clasps his hands together, feeling the full weight of the choice that has fallen on him. Cold sweat breaks out on the young man's forehead as he realizes the extent of the pressure being exerted. Without being intimidated by authority, he asks directly whether this means disregard for his real father. After a pause, the finger confidently brings the cup to his lips, demonstrating unexpected composure. The old patriarch smoothly turns the conversation to strength training, discussing the many talented warriors in their family. However, the young man is determined and believes that it is worth learning from only the most skilled masters. With a naive sparkle in his eyes, he asks directly whether Diner Lionheart would agree to personally mentor him. The gray-haired elder maintains a mysterious expression as he weighs such a bold request. Young Lionheart's gaze lights up with genuine excitement as he yearns to discover the true extent of the power of the head of the great house. The corners of Diner Lionheart's lips curl into the faint smile of an experienced strategist. He readily accepts the challenge, but immediately slyly remarks that there is someone in the clan who is much more outstanding. The young man freezes in silent question, burning with curiosity as he awaits the name of the mysterious teacher. The patriarch speaks the name Gillard Lionheart, acknowledging that he was once the man's superior, but that he now has the upper hand. Memories of a formidable warrior, whose thunderous authority inspires awe, flash through my mind. Changing the subject, the elder asks whether the boy's father shared the basics of magical art. The boy waves his hand with slight awkwardness, admitting that he has so far consciously avoided such difficulties. After all, he understands perfectly well that if he had immersed himself in theory beforehand, the mana in his veins could have awakened much earlier. Diner Lionheart nods approvingly, noting the iron discipline of the guy who never missed a single training session. The flash of battle fury of Gamel Death Knight reminds us of the harsh price of endless battles. Even under the strict supervision of his mentors, the young heir stubbornly pursues his own path, comprehending the secrets of energy. The patriarch closes his eyes for a moment, plunging into deep thought. The young man's face regains its cold concentration, hiding his true intentions. The elder mentally weighs the risks, fearing that a careless word could turn his wayward grandson against the entire family. The official part has come to an end, and the patriarch gently suggests continuing the conversation over a cup of tea in a relaxed atmosphere. They sit in the silence of a luxurious living room, surrounded by soft light and the heavy atmosphere of unspoken words. The remains of an exquisite meal lay frozen on the table, highlighting the silent tension between generations. Eugene stands up abruptly, declaring that it is time for him to go, but the elderly patriarch immediately stops him with a gesture. However, young Lionheart, with a slight smile, refuses the escort, preferring to explore the estate himself. Leaving the elder behind, he confidently walks along the spacious corridors of the family nest. A sudden whiff of magic makes Eugene alert and listen to his own feelings. A subtle trail of familiar perfume hangs distinctly in the air, betraying someone's hidden presence. The guy's sharp gaze turns towards the empty corner, behind which someone is clearly hiding. He turns around abruptly, catching the faint vibrations of someone else's aura in the semi-darkness of the corridor. But the source of the strange trace froze in place, as if afraid to give itself away prematurely. Ignoring the lurking spy, Eugene calmly continues his way along the red carpet. The devastatingly familiar rustle of a heavy silk skirt is heard very close by, destroying the illusion of privacy. As soon as he turns the corner, a female figure in a luxurious ball gown appears before him. The woman pretends to be surprised, as if their meeting was pure chance. But Eugene immediately sees through this cheap theater, fully understanding that they were deliberately waiting for him. His eyes widen in surprise as the mask of indifference nearly cracks at the seams. He immediately pulls himself together and politely bows his head, introducing himself in full form. A woman with a fake smile starts up a conversation, pretending to be stuck in that part of the corridor by accident. Eugene looks directly at his interlocutor, demanding that she stop beating around the bush and get down to business. Behind the beautiful fan lies a predatory grin, revealing the true intentions of the uninvited guest. Irritated reproaches flashed through the noble lady's thoughts. This upstart dared to humiliate the young heir of the main branch, and then triumphantly completed the blood ritual. However, the guy himself maintains an inscrutable expression on his face, not showing the slightest fear of the pressure from others. Doubts about his honesty are instantly shattered against a wall of unshakable confidence, because he clearly knows the value of his own actions. The interlocutor's gaze grows cold, capturing every change of emotion on the face of young Lionheart. But Eugene has no intention of engaging in idle small talk and dryly retorts that the details of their private conversation will remain a secret. The woman immediately changes tactics, smiling falsely and assuring him that no one is going to interrogate him. Eugene frowns slightly in confusion, trying to figure out the true motive behind such a sudden change in tone. As if making excuses for past grievances, the guest starts talking about the recent incident with Xian, citing her extreme busyness. But the guy nips these excuses in the bud, declaring that he and Xian have already sorted everything out personally. The unfortunate hesitation gives way to feigned relief when the lady pretends to fully share his wise opinion. She gently concludes the conversation, expressing hope that now the long-awaited peace will reign within the clan. Eugene nods with a wide smile, emphasizing that they both belong to the great Lionheart family and share the same family. At this moment, a predatory, almost insane gaze, full of unspoken rage, flashes behind the fan. Unaware of the hidden threat, the guy calmly asks if he is free and can finally leave this room. His false well-wisher feigns a sigh, sending the young man off to a well-deserved rest. Eugene turns away and walks slowly down the luxurious corridor. The name of Enisilla, Glide's wife, comes to mind, and her appearance promises new troubles. But as soon as the guide disappeared from sight, the guest's mask cracked at the seams, revealing a face distorted with blind rage and shock. Her fingers dig painfully into the folds of her fan, while the back of the retreating young man is reflected in her gaze, glassy with anger. Meanwhile, the heavy carriage gates of the estate swing open, revealing new mysteries and dangers of this world. The heavy tread of boots echoes through the silence, announcing that the moment of truth has arrived. Nathan Lionheart pauses on the threshold, looking at the young heir with a hidden trepidation. There's a look of shock in his eyes. Could this boy really have defeated everyone in the bloody test? The old veteran feels a lump in his throat. His own son has accomplished the impossible. Harsh images of the past flash through my memory when young Eugene was just paving his thorny path, and Nathan Lionheart himself could barely cover his back. Then they were just outcasts in the shadow of a great family, caught in the grip of contempt from the arrogant nobility. But now, tears of pride cloud the veteran's eyes, erasing years of grievances and disappointments. He furtively wipes the moisture from his eyelashes, not believing his own luck. A stunned Nathan Lionheart turns to look at the fluttering banners, as if seeking confirmation in the very grandeur of the family home. Before him stands the very boy whose smile shines brighter than any awards or relics. The old man can no longer contain his emotions. He rushes forward, embracing Eugene in a strong, crushing embrace. Diener Lionheart watches this scene from the sidelines, arms crossed and a warm, wise smile shining on everything around him. At that moment, the formidable warrior turns into an ordinary father, whose heart is breaking from the tenderness that overwhelms it. Eugene squints slyly, reminding his father of his recent skepticism. The touched father steps back for a moment to look into the eyes of his triumphant son and atone for past doubts. Suddenly, Nathan Lionheart's gaze falls on the majestic figure of Gillard Lionheart, towering behind them. The embarrassed father quickly takes a step back, finally remembering his manners in front of the patriarch. And while a confused Nathan Lionheart hurries to introduce himself to the guest, Gillard Lionheart extends his hand with a gentle gesture. And Eltree and player. Got. A meeting with the head of the great Lionheart family begins with polite smiles and a firm handshake. Gillard Lionheart wastes no time and suggests continuing the conversation behind closed doors. Diener Lionheart readily accepts the invitation, although a shadow of hidden anxiety can already be seen on his face. As they head into the house, young Eugene watches them with a thoughtful look. Over a cup of tea, Gillard Lionheart's proposal comes as a bolt from the blue. The clan leader calmly sips his tea, confirming his intentions with all the cold confidence. He lays it on softly, promising the new family member full integration and support. But Diener Lionheart senses a trap beneath his noble facade and can barely contain his growing panic. He rises abruptly from the table, trying to find the right words against the will of the influential patriarch. Paternal anxiety forces him to overcome his fear in the face of the formidable head of the family. Gillard Lionheart is only slightly surprised by such a violent reaction, maintaining a feigned calm. Diener Lionheart openly expresses his fears about how cruelly other family members might treat the boy. Dark images of arrogant relatives ready to trample on the hopes of others immediately come to mind. The patriarch thoughtfully touches his chin, weighing every word of his interlocutor. However, behind these nightmares lies something far more dangerous: the cold calculation and ambition of the clan itself. Shadows of the past and the grim faces of their kin hint that the Lionheart's true motives are far from charitable. Gillard Lionheart touches his interlocutor's shoulder reassuringly, assuring him that the boy's talents will serve the good of the whole family. He paints an idyllic picture of the future, where Eugene is surrounded by the care of new brothers and sisters. But Diener Lionheart already understands that resistance is futile in the face of the Lionheart's unyielding will. With a heavy heart, he admits defeat, realizing that the boy's fate is sealed. Diener Lionheart sighs heavily, steeling himself for the most difficult conversation of his life. Before him stands the one he truly loved with all his heart, ready to defend his home at any moment. The boy's eyes flash with a recognizable spark of fury and determination familiar to every great warrior of the clan. His blade cuts through the air with such impeccable speed that it seems as if the very space around him is being sucked into the funnel. A stunned Diener watches this dazzling display of power, feeling the absurdity of his own fears. Eugene stops abruptly, turning his piercing gaze on his adoptive father with slight incomprehension. The old warrior lowers his head, feeling the weight of the inevitable choice hanging over them. The guy frowns, noticing the depressed state of his loved one and trying to get to the bottom of the true cause of his anxiety. He looks around incredulously, trying to understand what exactly could have thrown the elder off balance so badly. Diner silently looks at the ground, unable to find the strength to voice the terrible decision that weighed heavily on his soul. He glances furtively at the boy and swallows convulsively, dreading the impending reaction. Eugene's gaze falls on a legendary weapon, shrouded in legends and rumors about its formidable owner. Diner's face is distorted by bitterness and the unbearable burden of responsibility for the child's future. They stand side by side under a serene sky, but the tension between them could be cut with a knife. The guy confidently states that he is already aware of all the details of the upcoming changes. Diner, wringing her hands in despair, begs him to agree to adoption for the sake of a brighter tomorrow. Clenching his fists until his knuckles turn white, the man warns the boy of the harsh trials that lie ahead. Eugene carelessly touches the back of his head, waving off other people's fears with a slight grin. With a mischievous and cheeky smile, he declares that he, the true Lionheart, will never be broken by anyone. Diner can barely hold back tears, finally realizing the full depth of this amazing boy's character. Diner freezes in surprise, not believing his own ears when the boy looks at him with absolute childish sincerity. Even in this new status and under the vaults of someone else's greatness, he remembers his roots and the one who was truly his father. Unable to bear the overwhelming emotions, Diner leaps up and embraces the boy in a tight, tear-shaken hug. At this moment, young Lionheart mentally weighs the pros and cons of the inevitable adoption, finding considerable benefit for himself in this situation. Ultimately, the status of heir opens the door to enormous resources, which are worth a little patience. However, the dark shadows of the past are already stretching out their tentacles, and the young man understands perfectly well, ambitious ladies of high society will not leave him alone. Each of them is eager to get their hands on a talented young man in order to turn him into a puppet for their intrigues. But the boy has no intention of dancing to someone else's tune and plans to stick to his own line, regardless of other people's ambitions. If someone decides to push him too hard, he is ready to show his teeth and respond with brute force. An instant explosion of rage shakes the space, scattering dust and causing those around to recoil in fear. His hand rests confidently on the hilt of the blade, ready to bare the steel at any moment. A mischievous smile touches his lips again, because there is no longer any point in hiding his true nature. Meanwhile, in the glittering ballroom, a celebration is taking place, designed to demonstrate the generosity of the ruling branch of the family. Here, amid the glitter of crystal and the whispers of courtiers, Diner unexpectedly attracts everyone's attention. A colorful couple of fellow tribesmen immediately appears nearby, noisily and unceremoniously offering him to evaluate secret methods of pumping up muscles. Gargus proudly shows off his sculpted biceps, causing those around him to look at each other in bewilderment. The boy, watching this circus from the sidelines and sipping wine, decides to stay away from the madmen. At the other end of the hall, a completely different drama is unfolding. An unfortunate young man stands dejectedly frozen under the heavy gaze of his powerful patroness. His shoulders are slumped, and his face shows the bitter despair of a man completely broken by someone else's will. A cold and calculating voice instructs him to act more confidently, but behind these words lies only a desire to suppress his will even more. On this quiet and festive evening, the silver-haired young man stood frozen with a glass of wine, feeling the weight of other people's words. A cold, piercing female voice sounds nearby, full of hidden fear and bitterness for their common future. He looks down, trying to cope with the growing panic and the awareness of his own powerlessness. But the interlocutor is not going to back down. Fanatical obsession and deep shock can be seen in her eyes. As if agreeing with the inevitable, he choked out one short word. The shadow of the senior mentor hangs over him like a heavy burden, dictating harsh conditions for the sake of the illusory greatness of the family. He is persistently told that he needs to enlist the support of an influential relative in order to survive in this snake pit. A mother's hand guides him forward, demanding not just a union, but unconditional submission to family ambitions. The guy sighs heavily, mentally wondering how he could possibly accomplish such an impossible task. Comical images of their confrontation come to mind, where pride clashes with the need to bow. While he is deep in thought, someone nearby is enthusiastically devouring a birthday cake, not sharing his worries at all. After a short confirmation, he moves further down the ballroom, followed by his constant companion. The girl immediately follows on his heels, continuing to casually discuss the intricacies of their family tree. He responds to her naive reproaches with his usual coldness, dismissing any attempts to achieve family warmth. But she doesn't calm down, demanding that they at least call her older sister out of politeness, even if the difference is measured in seconds. A storm of indignation rushes through his head at the mere thought of obeying this girl. A mental cry of despair reflects the absurdity of what is happening for someone who has already lived more than one life. Meanwhile, at the other end of the hall, another key figure in this complex game appears. Armu Lionheart. The conversation takes a serious turn when it comes to the upcoming trip to Aros and testing the heir's true abilities. Vermut Lionheart coldly and bluntly states that the status of heir will not save one from the harsh selection unless there is real power behind it. The young man looks away with an intense gaze, plunging into deep thought under the stern gazes of those around him. There is a mentor standing nearby, ready to support or give advice at this critical moment. My memory flashes back to my past years of study, when magic seemed like a salvation from the gloomy walls of the family estate. The heart was pounding with anxiety, causing the young man to nervously clench his fingers. He just wants to escape from this suffocating house and finally devote himself entirely to the study of secret arts. The young man glanced sideways at Daner Leonhardt and caught his heavy gaze, filled with hidden strength. Daner Leonhardt only smiles encouragingly, making it clear that the final decision rests with the guy himself. The internal tension reaches its peak, forcing you to hold your breath in anticipation of the inevitable. A sudden shout breaks the silence as a woman abruptly intervenes in the conversation. Her eyes widen with anger, and her words pierce the air with icy reproach. The young man flinches, feeling a heavy hand fall on his shoulder. The rage flares in her eyes with such force that even Daner Lionheart involuntarily tenses. She pulls the young man closer with an imperious gesture, not allowing him to avoid a difficult conversation. The woman's thoughts are full of anger and anticipation of quick deliverance from the hated heir. She can hardly contain the hatred seething inside her as she looks at the young man standing in front of her. The image of Arosa flashes through his mind, where the young man will gain not only knowledge but also influential allies. Daner Leonhardt reminds us of his high status as the legitimate heir of a great family. Gritting his teeth in impotent rage, the young man suppresses the protest that is bursting out. At the gloomy gates of the estate, a farewell scene unfolds, where everyone hides their true motives behind routine smiles. The estate sees off the heirs of the Lionheart clan with stern glances from elders and forced smiles from potential rivals. While some enjoy the bliss of luxurious quarters, awaiting their time, others tighten discipline to the limit. Eugene steps forward with determination to face a new stage of testing, confident in his abilities. Internal practices and meditation allow magicians to accumulate mana scattered in the air without grueling physical exertion. In his past life, Gamel preferred grueling physical training, relying on raw endurance and a battle-hardened spirit. However, the true greatness of the Lionheart clan is built on secret breathing techniques passed down from generation to generation. In the shadow of the ancient trees, Lionheart, whose sly gaze hides more than it seems at first glance, is already waiting for him. Eugene stops in front of him, feeling the tension in the very air of this secluded place. Step by step, they go deeper into the forest thicket, where every root and stone is imbued with ancient power. Lod glances over his shoulder, giving his companion a meaningful smile full of hidden meaning. After all, the source of mana hidden here is not of natural origin. It was created 300 years ago by the legendary Vermouth himself. Lod turns to Eugene, a hint of mockery flickering in his golden eyes at the enormity of his ancestors' creation. Eugene glances at this great relic, mentally acknowledging the scale of the genius founder's madness. Then, Lod casually gestures over his shoulder, inviting the young man to follow him further down the winding path. A confident mentor warns with a smile about the upcoming difficulties, because not everyone succeeds in comprehending the hidden on the first try. Eugene moves forward confidently, absorbing every word of his experienced relative. Protected by his youth, he has every chance of feeling the elusive flows of mana more quickly. Lod raises a finger thoughtfully, assessing the scale of the upcoming work on errors. They continue their journey through the silence of the forest, where every step brings Eugene closer to a new understanding of his own strength. Lod throws out a casual remark about deadlines, but behind this lightness lies a hidden challenge to the ambitions of young Lionheart. Eugene parries the bold statement with a sly grin, confident in his own superiority. The quiet rustling of the leaves of the ancient forest accompanies their path to the secluded building. Lod leads Eugene confidently along the forest path, leaving no room for retreat. The sun's rays break through the treetops, illuminating the path to the secret training area. The creaky wooden door opens, revealing a cool and deserted-looking room. Lod turns around with a smug smile, nodding for the young man to follow him deeper. They descend the stone steps to the bottom, where thick shadows obscure the true scale of the cache. Ahead opens a spacious underground hall, in the center of which a mysterious magic circle shines. From the top of the steps, Lod casts a condescending glance at Eugene, full of undisguised superiority. Eugene drops sharply to his knees right in the center of the glowing circle, feeling the heaviness of the moment. Lod points gracefully to the sacred space, speaking about the greatness of the family. He pronounces the name of a legendary ancestor whose legacy still hangs over every descendant. With a mentoring tone, Lod explains the flaws of other people's methods while exalting his own art. Suddenly, Lod's figure is enveloped in a blinding glow of pure magical energy. His face lights up with the triumphant smile of a man who has reached the pinnacle of power. Eugene freezes, stunned by the unexpected discovery and the scale of the truth revealed. Menacing images of the past flash through my memory, reminding me of the incomprehensible power of vermouth. Eugene grits his teeth, suppressing a sudden wave of irritation and annoyance. Lod's radiant aura presses upon the space, causing the air to warp with tension. He towers over the seated Eugene, asserting his superiority with cold confidence. Lod chuckles skeptically, certain that the boy is simply imagining things that aren't really there. He casually creates a glowing sphere on the tip of his finger, demonstrating his ease with energy manipulation. But at that very moment, a tiny spark of alien mana obediently reaches out to the frozen Eugene, causing him to groan in pain. Lod's face contorts with sudden alarm as he realizes this isn't just a figment of his imagination. Eugene, with his eyes closed, confidently points the direction, unerringly capturing currents invisible to others. His fingers trace invisible patterns in the air, finding energy sources on the left and then on the right. Lod steps back, watching in amazement as the boy effortlessly controls what should have taken weeks of rigorous training. A predatory, satisfied smile blossoms on Eugene's face as he turns to face his dumbfounded mentor. Lod clutches his head, frantically trying to comprehend the full scale of the madness that is happening. He quickly closes the distance, dropping to his knees in front of the newcomer who has startled him. His golden eyes showed genuine shock and confusion at what he saw. And Eugene continues to immerse himself in meditation, radiating a frighteningly mature calm. Their eyes meet for a moment, full of unspoken tension and hidden rivalry. They synchronously descend to the floor in the center of the magic circle, closing the complex contour. A bright flash illuminates the room as their palms touch, triggering an exchange of pure power. In an instant, a spark flies between their hands, uniting two different wills into a single stream. A massive battle of energies is unfolding within Eugene's consciousness, requiring immediate intervention. The invisible boundary between them thins to the limit, leaving only a ringing emptiness. A raging flame of mana rises around the frozen figure of the young man, causing Lod to jump back in panic. The flame envelops him entirely, turning him into a shining cocoon of absolute concentration. Lod crosses his arms over his chest, watching the young man's deep meditation with curiosity and slight distrust. A dense cocoon of energy envelops a concentrated face, where every feature is distorted by colossal tension. The mind, immersed in meditation, tries to calm the magical storm raging within. The young man's inner world is illuminated by a mystical glow that captures the incredible potential of his soul. A bead of sweat rolls down the cheek. Mental stress tests the will to the limits of human capabilities. Suddenly, golden eyes open wide, radiating an incomprehensible, frightening power. Lod freezes under this piercing gaze, feeling the weight of the awakened power. However, a moment later, the tension is replaced by a sly smile, diffusing the dense atmosphere. They exchange a playful handshake, cementing their sudden understanding. Lod takes a step back, gesturing for the young man to return to his normal life. Walking along the sunlit path, the mentor gestures animatedly, sharing his wisdom. A flash of memory reveals the perfect silhouette of mana awakened within the young man. The image of the legendary Lionheart Vermouth emerges in the memory as a standard of unattainable perfection. The elder Lionheart continues his walk through the forest, gently nudging his companion to think. Memories return to the harsh training of gifted young men from noble houses. Lod squints appraisingly, weighing the prospects for future generations of the clan. The realization of the colossal time frame makes the young man's eyes widen in surprise. But the mentor immediately raises an encouraging finger, assuring that persistence works wonders. A mischievous smile lights up the face of a young man determined to prove his worth. A flash of wild passion distorts his features. With such an arsenal, he will exceed all expectations. Thoughts about tailoring your workouts to your needs pop into your head with a predatory grin. Gratitude sounds false, because behind it lies cold calculation and anticipation of real power. The majestic spires of the estate rise up under a cloudless sky, hiding many secrets within their walls. Every stone of this grand building is imbued with centuries of history and the ambitions of a great family. In the courtyard, the two continue their unspoken game, where every word is weighed on the scales of hidden confrontation. The farewell words sound with feigned concern, but behind them lies a cold screening of unnecessary witnesses. The young heir responds with ease, instantly agreeing to a pre-Christmas vacation. As soon as the interlocutor leaves, the mask of obedience falls, revealing true contempt. The thought of empty instructions only evokes a smirk. Now he has much more important tasks. A sudden scream interrupts my thoughts, causing me to turn sharply towards the frightened voice. Nina runs out to meet him, not hiding her intense anxiety at all. The order sounds dry and peremptory, not tolerating any objections from the maid. The next moment, a blade appears in his hands, ready to serve as a conductor of will. Doubts whisper that concluding a true contract will not be easy, but it is too late to retreat. A momentary flash illuminates the blade as pure mana energy flows into the cold metal. A sudden blast of the elements raises clouds of dust, causing the maid to recoil in horror. A powerful gust of wind knocks her off her feet, filling the air with a wild whistle and panic. A raging whirlwind emerges from nowhere, sweeping away everything in its path with incredible fury. Standing in the epicenter of the elements, he feels something grand and uncontrollable awakening. Shock freezes her movements for a moment, because what is happening exceeds all expectations. A flash of rage gives way to an icy realization. Gamel is praying for help from the Wind Spirit King himself. A massive funnel fills the space, and the majestic face of the elements appears before the young man. But something about this powerful appearance makes Gamel's heart skip a beat. The ancient spirit looks at him with an incomprehensible heaviness, as if reading the very memory of the reborn soul. In the silence of the raging wind, Gamel tries to gather his scattered thoughts together. A question arises in his head, tormenting him from within. Why did the great Vermouth spare the demon kings? He clenches his fist, trying to contain the rage that is bursting out. After all, Vermouth's secret motives are still shrouded in impenetrable darkness. Confusion takes over his composure for a second, causing the guy to freeze. Memory helpfully brings back dark images of the past, Vermouth face to face with a demonic enemy. In the image of the hero himself, whose sword is strong, but whose intentions are hidden behind a veil of secrecy. The wind roars in his ears, but Gamel only clenches his teeth harder, holding back the storm inside. He starts shouting, demanding an answer. Wasn't there an agreement between Vermouth and the King of Imprisonment? But the silent whirlwind responds only with cold defiance. Spirits do not know the secrets of others. The enraged boy turns around, feeling like he's being led by the nose. The voice of the elements sounds arrogant and unyielding. Only those who stood there personally know the truth. Gamel's anger reaches its boiling point, causing his face to contort with rage. The spirit coldly retorts, reminding him of the limits of what is permitted. The boy's strength was initially insufficient for such a grandiose summoning. There is no more strength to restrain himself, and Gamel spills out all his rage on the insolent spirit. Why? Unable to withstand the onslaught of an invisible force, the boy takes off, trying to protect himself from the furious wind. A powerful gust throws him to the ground, depriving him of his last strength. The elements rage with incredible fury, sweeping over the estate. The maid stands frozen in horror on the threshold, watching the disaster unfold. Exhausted by the struggle, he falls face down, sinking into a heavy unconsciousness. Time is erased, leaving only a ringing emptiness and sweat on the face. Night gives way to dawn, but in the silence of the room, the young hero continues to sleep like the dead. Suddenly his eyes fly open, illuminated by a golden glow. A sharp scream cuts through the silence as unbearable pain pierces the body. Awareness comes slowly. Internal energy seems to have been burned to the ground. A bitter but confident smile touches the corners of his lips. All the pieces of the puzzle are finally coming together to form a coherent picture. The door creaks open, disturbing the morning solitude. A frightened Nina looks into the room, not believing her eyes. The guy blinks in confusion, trying to comprehend what happened. Clearing his throat, he hoarsely asks how long he was unconscious. Faithful Nina immediately runs up, breathing a sigh of relief and noting that about 6 hours have already passed. Having calmed the maid, he nods to his thoughts and decides to call the others. Soon, Gillard Lionheart and Diner Lionheart appear in the room, ready to hear the truth. The boy looks closely at his elders, realizing that there is nothing left to hide. The guy weighs his words mentally, fully understanding that it is simply impossible to hide such a large-scale phenomenon. Of course, he won't reveal everything down to the smallest detail, but he will still have to share part of the truth. He claims to have been visited by the King of Wind Spirits himself, a statement that takes the breath away from those present. Gillard Lionheart and Diner Lionheart stand frozen in absolute shock, unable to believe their own ears. The guy adds with a carefree smile that the ancient entity simply hadn't been summoned for a long time, so he became curious to look at the mortal. Lord Lionheart barely contains his panic, clutching his shoulder and reminding himself that none of the descendants of Vermouth Lionheart himself has ever managed to achieve something like this. Images of that stunning moment when the powerful elemental answered the young hero's call come flooding back. As if nothing had happened, the boy continued to smile, telling how the spirit promised to wait for a new meeting before returning to its world. Hearing this incredible confession, Lord Lionheart and Gillard Lionheart look at it with superstitious awe. Gillard Lionheart breaks into a wide smile, admitting that he is looking at a truly amazing child. The patriarch of the Lionheart house spreads his arms in admiration as he recalls the boy's incredible journey. At first, this little brat managed to awaken magical power with incredible ease, leaving everyone in deep amazement. And now the king of wind spirits himself has won his favor, which is completely out of bounds. The guy just smiles shyly under the stream of well-deserved praise, radiating sincere joy. Gillard Lionheart gently points out that they had originally planned to send him on a new journey after the blood ritual, but plans have clearly changed. The young hero politely thanks his elders, but immediately refuses, declaring that he does not dare take up their and Glid's precious time. Lord Lionheart interrupts him with a sly grin, declaring that he intends to train the talented youth personally. He assures that Mr. Glide will certainly join the training, providing the boy with the best conditions for growth. Gillard Lionheart looks at them with a warm, fatherly smile, mentally comparing his young heirs to the legendary heroes of the past. Meanwhile, Cyan and Sizel are already in full swing preparing for the upcoming training, discussing their comrades' stunning successes. The young heir grips the hilt of the sword, confidently declaring his powers, but his rival only chuckles skeptically. She easily parries any words, showing that training with her does not promise anything simple. The guy grits his teeth, feeling growing irritation from this imperturbable mockery. Their gazes intersect in a tense confrontation, where each is eager to prove their superiority. With a sharp exhalation, he breaks away from the spot, cutting the air with a swift lunge. But his opponent responds with graceful ease, instantly closing the distance. The blades collide with a loud screech, striking sparks and filling the space with a powerful wave of energy. Hours of rest passed, and in the silence of the luxurious bedroom, the young fighter fell into a deep sleep. He sat up abruptly in bed and threw back the blanket, returning to wakefulness with a familiar movement. His fingers confidently rest on the hilt of the sword lying nearby. He resolutely draws the blade from its sheath, preparing for new challenges. The cold steel glows with a soft magical radiance, responding to the will of its owner. At that very moment, a tiny shining creature materializes in front of him, illuminating the room with a mysterious light. He pauses, looking appraisingly at the miniature spirit swirling around the blade. Sylph is a spirit of the lowest rank, and with his current powers he can only dream of more. The baby flutters very close, radiating soft but modest magical energy. The guy sighs wearily, remembering that the minds of the lower spirits are clearly not sufficient for meaningful dialogue. But suddenly his eyes widen in surprise and wild realization. The spirit narrows its glowing eyes, staring at him with sudden and sharp hostility. Teeping, too, having an estimated for the seasons. The swing of the sword cuts through the air, causing one to freeze in tension. The guy turns around, feeling an invisible presence of spirit hovering nearby. He moves forward resolutely, clutching the blade in his hand. He sank heavily onto the edge of the bed and stared thoughtfully into space. His golden eyes reveal deep thoughtfulness and the weight of unspoken thoughts. Familiar faces appear before my eyes, the proud sorceress Milkith Elhaya and the serene Anissa Slywood. And then comes the stern image of Moron Ruker, whose unblinking gaze inspires awe. The boy looks at his hands, realizing the limitations of a child's body. He understands that it is simply impossible to travel to distant lands right now. Clenching his fist until his knuckles turn white, he makes a silent vow to himself. But as soon as you look at your reflection, all doubts recede in the face of harsh reality. He looks at his muscular body, in which hidden strength boils. Even his reflection in the mirror responds to him with a confident grin. But despite all the success, an inner voice whispers a harsh truth: it's still not enough. The gaze becomes sharp and focused, ready for any challenge. The majestic walls of the estate are bathed in bright morning sun. He talks dreamily about the inevitable trip to Eros to learn magic. But a sudden memory makes him abruptly interrupt his thoughts and freeze. This morning started out completely differently, leaving traces of a hard, grueling battle on my face. Shock and disbelief froze in his eyes after what happened during training. The smile freezes on his face, exuding an unbearable, absolute confidence in his own superiority. A flash of pure energy shoots upward, enveloping the figure in an aura of overwhelming power. The defeated opponent falls helplessly to the ground, unable to believe what has happened. A trembling hand tries to grasp at the air, trying in vain to comprehend the scale of the defeat. The mind refuses to accept reality. How could one waste mana and instantly receive a crushing response? But for him, this is just a funny joke after all. His natural gift puts him outside all the rules. Rage boils in the chest of the defeated man, forcing him to clench his teeth in helplessness and anger at this insolent man. Every morning turns into a cruel test, where this demon methodically tramples him into the dirt. And in response, you hear only mocking indifference. If you don't like sparring, then don't ask. The gnashing of teeth and clenched fists reveal the full storm of indignation boiling under the skin. A surge of irritation makes me rise to my feet, but my memory once again returns me to the dark truths. After all, no matter how hard you try to comprehend the secrets of mastery, years of hard work can crash against the wall of an insurmountable barrier. 4 long years passed in fruitless attempts to cross the line, but the cherished goal remained unattainable. The shadow of stern instruction seems to hang over them, reminding them of family ties and duty. The old, menacing image of my brother comes back to me, causing me to retreat for a moment before a cold fear. But the insolent defendant merely brushes off the threats, continuing to stick to his guns. Anxiety breaks through the apparent indifference, causing the voice to tremble with foreboding. Thoughts return to those who will be left behind, who will have a hard time coping with any changes. A mocking look leaves no hope for sympathy for other people's experiences. A decisive step forward interrupts empty disputes, dragging with it the shadow of inevitable change. Eugene Lionheart confidently declares his intention to leave his native walls. The cunning glint in his eyes reveals the ambitious young man's far-reaching plans. The bewildered opponent only watches helplessly as the daring boy triumphs. The disarmed opponent realizes the bitterness of a crushing defeat. Elderly Gillard Lionheart freezes in horror at the audacity he hears. The head of a great family comes face to face with the unexpected impudence of a young descendant. Shock gives way to genuine bewilderment on the part of the experienced patriarch. After all, Eugene is already ahead of all his peers, having achieved incredible strength. However, young Lionheart is not content with what he has achieved. The limits of his usual training can no longer satisfy his thirst for power. Understanding your own hidden talents requires delving into the unknown mysteries of magic. Learning a new path will bring invaluable experience and open doors that were previously closed to him. A low bow becomes a sign of unwavering determination to follow the chosen path. Gillard Lionheart sighs heavily, weighing the risks of such a dangerous decision. An insightful elder assesses the scale of the impending changes. The latent tension gives way to an unexpected understanding of the young man's motives. The head of the clan is unable to resist such a fiery passion for knowledge. But for this freedom, Eugene will have to make a serious promise. The dark shadows of arrows and the black tower beckon those who step onto the forbidden path of magic. The sacred ideals of the Lionhearts have warned them for centuries against contact with darkness. Lord Lionheart, with a sly grin, assures that black magic is disgusting to him. With confident steps, the heir walks along the luxurious corridors of the family estate. There is a light knock on the massive front doors. Lod stops at the barrier, intending to start a difficult conversation. A brazen refusal comes from the other side of the door. The interlocutor refers to sweat after a grueling workout. In the semi-darkness of the corridor, Hera leaned against the wall, hiding her true emotions. With a slight grin, Lod asks if it was Sion who said too much. They stand back to back, separated only by the thickness of the massive door, as if in a duel of wits. Hera's voice trembles, betraying hidden anxiety and fierce rivalry. Lod only smiles softly, remaining completely calm in the face of other people's ambitions. With a mischievous twinkle in his eyes, he teases his interlocutor to recall their past sparring matches. Hera grits his teeth, asking in a strangled voice if the threat of another fight will stop him. Lod merely condescendingly throws out a joking nickname, not taking the threat seriously at all. The girl again plunges into dark thoughts, sighing heavily under the weight of unspoken words. Her fingers fiddle nervously with the fabric of her clothes as she tries to find the right arguments. Meanwhile, Lod frivolously inquires about the fate of other family members. The clan elder himself, Diner Lionheart, is enjoying his freedom to the fullest, riding a horse and racing with the wind. Hera's face again distorts with tension and internal conflict. She timidly presses her hands to her chest, recalling a recent frank conversation. Laud leans against the doorframe, his smile ever present, declaring that his resolve remains unshakable. Don't forget to practice hard and keep up your skills. The sound of confident footsteps breaks the silence of the luxurious corridor. Myrrh peeks into the room, catching Gamel Dinas off guard. The girl is genuinely surprised, not believing her ears. Gamel Dinas waves her goodbye easily and casually, but as soon as he turns away, Myrrh grinds his teeth in annoyance. She throws the door open, heading out into the new day. In the spacious hall, Gamel Dinas comes face to face with Diner Lionheart. The head of the family admonishes his grandson, urging him to avoid bad company and not to neglect his studies. Gamel Dinas counters with a sly smile, advising the old man not to forget about his physical fitness either. Diner almost falls out of his chair in surprise, amazed by such audacity. When they come face to face, they cannot hide their mutual respect. Diner notes with mixed feelings how much the guy has grown. With a slight grin, Gamel Dinas looks straight into the eyes of his older relative. Diner wishes him a safe journey as he sees his grandson off on his long journey. Ahead, a mysterious shining portal rises, and loved ones have gathered to see the young man off. Yillard Lionheart and Palago Lionheart look on with pride and quiet confidence. Gamel Dinas turns to the assembled group, urging them not to worry unnecessarily. Diner smiles as he thinks about the incredible talent of the young man, whose strength has already reached the 3 stars of white flame. His family sees him off with looks full of tenderness, anxiety, and undisguised longing. Eugene gently chides his elder for his sudden bout of sentimentality. He is determined to set out on his journey, despite the tears of others. Diner tries to pull himself together, blinking away the tears that have welled up. But the next second, the old man's face lights up with a wide, proud smile. A calm, confident smile appears on Eugene's face. He takes a step forward, leaving his homeland through a shimmering portal. After saying a short goodbye, the guy finally disappears into the magical glow. A majestic view of the capital's flying islands opens before the traveler's eyes. 5 powerful magical towers form a perfect 5-pointed star around the royal palace. Eugene settles comfortably into the flying carriage cutting through the air. Although he had been here before in his past life, the capital had changed beyond recognition. Majestic castles soar through the sky on giant platforms inscribed with ancient runes. The talkative guide enthusiastically describes the beauty of the capital region. He proudly declares that this grand spectacle is worthy of admiration. Eugene looks around curiously, noticing every little detail. However, his attention is drawn to an air carriage flying nearby, and he cautiously taps on the side. The guide rushes to reassure the passenger, assuring him of the absolute reliability of the transport. He notes that over centuries of flight, the design has been improved, minimizing risks. Eugene abruptly stops the guide's chatter with a raised hand, changing the subject. The guy states his main destination and asks to be taken to the residence of the wise Senya. The guide enthusiastically continues to pour out details, clearly captivated by ancient legends. Meanwhile, the crew glides smoothly through the air above the busy streets of the magical city. Guides like to embellish history, mentioning the legendary wise Senya and her great legacy. However, behind the beautiful facades lie secrets. 200 years ago, the great sorceress suddenly renounced her duties and disappeared. Where exactly she went after her passing remains one of the greatest mysteries to this day. There are all sorts of speculations about those dark days among local magicians and adventurers. Old-timers whisper that there was some secret conspiracy of influential circles behind her disappearance. But the young fellow traveler does not at all share the exalted delight of the chatty storyteller. After all, long before her departure, Amelia Mervyn bitterly mourned the death of her fallen comrade. Legends often distort the truth, turning the real pain of loss into cheap romantic fairy tales. The tour guide tenderly states that the stern Gamel suffered from unrequited love for the great sorceress. Such blatant nonsense literally takes Eugene's breath away with hidden rage. The guide turns around abruptly, shocked, asking his interlocutor if he misheard. Realizing what a tactless thing he had just said, the guide immediately and embarrassedly denied it. Eugene only smiles crookedly, hiding a storm of long-standing emotions behind feigned calm. But there is already a completely different, far more sinister version of these ancient events in the air. The mysterious disappearance of the wise Sina coincided with her fierce opposition to the construction of the Black Tower. Some secret sources claim that the wayward sorceress could have been eliminated in cold blood. The image of a lifeless body among gloomy walls makes one shudder with a bad feeling. The young man's face darkens. Behind the facade of beautiful fairy tales lies a harsh and bloody truth. Eugene Lionheart's hand clenched into a fist, betraying the tension beneath. In the midst of the conversation, the companion gesticulates animatedly, recalling the dark pages of the past. Eugene Lionheart's thoughts return to the events of days gone by and the ill-fated Black Tower. Ominous silhouettes and Amelia Mervyn, standing guard over ancient secrets, flash through my memory. But the young man's gaze remains cold and piercing, as if he sees the very essence of the deception. Luxurious carriages and soaring airships create the illusion of prosperity in this marvelous city. They arrive at a lively area where life, hidden from prying eyes, is in full swing. The scale of what was happening was staggering. Crowds of pilgrims filled the entire area in front of the majestic building. People are ready to undergo any humiliation and beg just to touch the source of the miracle. Eugene Lionheart looks around at this motley crowd of exalted petitioners. Sputnik willingly reveals the details of this grandiose and cynical business. There is an atmosphere of exaltation all around, fueled by rumors and belief in the impossible. The city streets stretch into the distance, reflecting the bustle of this huge human anthill. The guide continues his fascinating story, placing the necessary emphasis. The legends of this place speak of a miraculous power that can solve any problem. But the document check goes off without a hitch. The name Eugene Lionheart opens any door. The guards at the front entrance instantly recognize the distinguished guest and respectfully open the doors. The companion wisely remains outside, giving the hero freedom of action. Eugene Lionheart's smile turns dangerous and predatory. The game is just beginning. The luxurious decoration of the hall with a sparkling crystal chandelier impresses with its splendor. Behind a layer of illusion lies the true nature of man, revealing the very essence of his soul. A sudden school vis-a-vis disrupts the usual flow of thoughts with his abrupt insolence. But this look is full of cold determination. The guide does not intend to tolerate other people's antics. As Eugene Lionheart walks through the quiet corridors of a luxurious estate, he's plunged into painful memories. His golden eyes reveal deep weariness and unspoken anxiety about the future. Amelia Mervyn, leaning on her hands, lazily catches her breath after a hard battle. Guimaldinus takes a deep breath, methodically bandaging his hands, which were wounded in the fight. Looking around the battlefield, he glances at his companion in bewilderment. The boy tries to comprehend the scale of the destruction that has occurred, but the words get stuck in his throat. Nearby, the defeated Moron Ruhr lies unconscious, shocked by the enemy's power. Amelia Mervyn throws her hand up in the air in triumph, celebrating with a mischievous smile. Meanwhile, Guimaldinus, with a sly smile, voices his grandiose plans for the future. Amelia Mervyn only snorts condescendingly at these fantasies, considering them empty chatter. Guimaldinus throws up his hands in indignation, not believing such skepticism. The realization of what was said suddenly overwhelms him. His face distorts in comic horror. Amelia Mervyn advances menacingly towards her comrade, her fists clenched in righteous anger. The shock of her pressure makes the guy press himself against the wall in complete confusion. Suddenly, her expression softens, giving way to deep melancholy. Eugene Lionheart pauses in the stateroom, staring in fascination at the formal portrait on the wall. Looking at him from the canvas is the same unchanging Amelia Mervyn, captured in her heyday. Eugene freezes, feeling an old, painfully familiar feeling awakening inside him. His hand rises involuntarily, ready to grab what is hidden in this silence. But the vigilant guard immediately stops the attempt, reminding him of the strict rules of the estate. The guy swallows his irritation, gritting his teeth in frustration at every step of the accompanying supervision. Stop wasting time on portraits, because the true secrets of this family are hidden in completely different corners. The mansion's vast halls and corridors amaze the imagination with their luxury and centuries-old history. He touches the spines of ancient tomes, hoping to find a clue among the dusty pages. However, a shout from behind him brings him back to reality, forcing him to barely contain his rage. How long can we keep track of his every breath, as if he were a dangerous criminal? Eugene squints thoughtfully. If the clues aren't on the surface, he'll have to look for them in unconventional ways. Suddenly, the boy's gaze catches something strange and inexplicable in space. He pulls out his artifact, carefully studying the flickering crimson light. Thoughts race through my head. Could it be that this relic responded to the presence of ancient magic? He steps forward resolutely, tired of wandering aimlessly through the staterooms. All the hiding places, offices, and bedrooms have already been searched through, but there are no results. The guy ruffles his hair in frustration. The search has reached a dead end. Since he was not given a direct answer, he would have to act decisively and according to his own rules. He casts a meaningful glance at the guard frozen in the corner, who clearly doesn't understand anything, and with a wide, insolent grin, Amelia Mervyn demonstrates to fate and herself the most eloquent gesture. Let him know that it is not so easy to carry it out, even hundreds of years after her departure. And this portrait on the wall seems to silently watch his triumph. As evening approaches, the city plunges into twilight, illuminated by the lights from the windows of luxurious buildings. The conductor, exhausted by the wait, finally breaks into a satisfied smile, anticipating easy money. Lord Lionheart generously throws him a gold coin, not looking at the man, who is at a loss for words with happiness. With a careless wave of his hand, he dismisses his guide, intending to continue his journey alone. Their aircrew glides silently over the rooftops of the capital, cutting through the evening coolness. The companion is overcome with anxiety when Lord Lionheart suddenly turns the conversation to a dangerous topic. The young heir casts a meaningful glance, setting the stage for revelations. The man swallows nervously under the weight of this close attention. The confession sounds stunning. From the moment of his adoption, he was never able to exchange a single word with the head of the family. Lord Lionheart hastens to reassure his interlocutor, assuring him that this secret will remain only between them. He beats his chest resolutely, sealing his promise with his word of honor. A shadow of genuine surprise flickers in his shining golden eyes. The interlocutor nervously adjusts his cap, admitting that he himself only has scraps of rumors. A raised finger signifies the beginning of strange conversations about dubious entertainment. Lord Lionheart puts his hand to his chin thoughtfully, seeing nothing wrong with simple pleasures. But the companion waves his hands in panic, trying to recklessly interrupt the dangerous phrase. The word "Sue" breaks off mid-sentence, hanging in the electrified air. Lord Lionheart tilts his head in confusion, trying in vain to decipher what was left unsaid. At this point, Lord Lionheart learns of the existence of succubi, which causes him mixed feelings. A storm of indignation boils inside him at such an absurd and outrageous state of affairs. How could anyone have imagined such madness? Did anyone seriously think that evil spirits would appear in quiet Aros? The interlocutor hastens to explain that in the shadows of the ancient city lurk not only fallen black magicians, but also far more sinister creatures. Eugene clutches his head, completely speechless from such incredible news. The thought of his noble kinsman enjoying himself peacefully in the company of the vicious maidens of the Black Tower seems to him the height of madness. The interlocutor points out a grim truth. In any large city, there is invariably a corner whose sins are usually overlooked. Under cover of night, this forbidden street comes alive, filled with dubious characters and the crimson light of lanterns. Eugene demands that the coordinates of this den be immediately revealed, not wanting to remain in the dark any longer. The interviewee explains that this area is known as Short Jacket Street, whose doors open only on nights of the full moon. Eugene sinks into dark thoughts, intending to keep his distance and not interfere with other people's debauchery. But the realization of who exactly his wayward brother is indulging in pleasures with reignites the fuse of his rage. The interlocutor tearfully begs him to keep everything he heard a strict secret, fearing reprisals. Eugene, with a contemptuous grin, assures his trembling companion that his oath is strong and he does not intend to blab. However, anger gets the better of common sense, and Eugene barely restrains himself from strangling the talkative informant on the spot. His gaze stops at the night sky, where the full moon has already come into its own. The flying carriage quickly cuts through the air, approaching the majestic city tower. The tower's tall spires rise above the sleeping rooftops of Aros's peaceful quarters. Suddenly, the path is blocked by a frightened Hera who clearly did not expect to meet anyone here. A powerful explosion shakes the walls of the tower, splitting the silence of the night and causing the little witch to recoil in horror. Lord Lionheart looks around in confusion, trying to understand the cause of the sudden cataclysm. Hera, with a confused smile, tries to straighten her hat, which has slipped to one side, making excuses for the chaos in the Red Tower. And at that very moment, enraged shadow beasts burst forth from the breach. Barbarian Serpus's instant reaction saves the situation. His hands grab the monsters out of the air with lightning speed. One movement, and the shadow creatures crumble into thousands of purple sparks under the weight of magical power. Roberian lands on the stone floor, shrouded in an ominous aura and ready to defend order. His gaze fills with cold rage, directed at the frightened culprits of the incident. The younger mages and a terrified Amelia Merwyn realize with horror the scale of the impending disaster. Roberian starts shouting, scolding the unfortunate students for their monstrous carelessness. The shadow creatures have no mind, and if it weren't for his intervention, the city streets would be flooded with innocent blood. Amelia Mervyn and her companions press themselves into the ground, not daring to raise their eyes under the punishing gaze of the magician. Nina watches the unfolding drama with fear and bated breath. Roberian's anger reaches its peak when he demands that this farce be immediately stopped and the area cleared. Realizing that he had gone too far, his face instantly changed, blinking in surprise. Floating in the air, Roberian glances at Laud and the other inhabitants of the tower frozen below. With a light jump, he lands on the cobblestones, instantly replacing his anger with a gracious smile. He spreads his arms in a welcoming gesture and notes with false warmth how much everyone has changed. Laud responds to the greeting with a restrained grin, noting that Roberian himself remains the same. He only smiles condescendingly, explaining his unchanged appearance as simply maintaining his youth. Laud's mind flashes back to the last meeting 4 years ago, when this man made a completely different impression. However, this young man still maintains impeccable self-control and skillfully hides his true tension behind a polite air. Gamel cast a heavy glance at his interlocutor, mentally acknowledging the truth of his words, but the internal tension only grew. He just smiles carefreely, assuring that magic is a science, although complex, but feasible for such an outstanding mind. The interlocutor narrows his eyes warningly, a cold metallic gleam flashing in his piercing eyes. He turns away abruptly, glancing at the massive oak doors leading deeper into the tower. At this moment, the mage's aura heats up to the limit, causing the air around him to sparkle with a hidden threat. The doors swing open with a deafening crash, revealing the frightened figure of the intruder. The poor fellow is shaking with terror, barely able to stay on his feet under the weight of the monstrous pressure. The unfortunate man's eyes widened with wild fear, and his face distorted into a grimace of absolute panic. Gamel looks with cold contempt at the trembling fool, whose pitiful appearance speaks eloquently of a stormy night in the company of succubi. Standing on the threshold in the company of Gamel, this weakling looks completely lost and does not know where to begin with his excuses. Shifting from foot to foot and nervously combing his hair, the poor fellow mumbles apologies for his disgraceful state. Gamel's gaze becomes deadly dangerous, and his lips twist into a sinister smile. He just swallows nervously under the cold night sky, feeling like a cornered animal. Standing nearby, Gamel crosses his arms over his chest, watching this farce with undisguised irritation. The magician, with a disgusted expression on his face, delivers his verdict. If these two don't have urgent matters to attend to, it's high time to engage in self-education. The frightened guest quickly retreats, fearfully holding the heavy door. The heavy doors slam shut with a creak, cutting them off from the noisy outside world. Left alone, they return to their interrupted conversation, and the atmosphere around them instantly lightens. Gamel wisely notes that the status of a personal disciple could cause a lot of envy and discontent among other adepts of the tower. Gamel confidently states that for now, he prefers to comprehend the secrets of magic alone. The mentor accepts his choice without any unnecessary objections, giving the young man complete freedom with a slight smile. Thanking for their understanding, young Lionheart takes the first steps towards his goal. Here, far from the usual luxury of the family estate, the conditions are more modest, but for persistent training this is more than enough. Gamel is determined and ready to prove what he is capable of. The days within the tower's walls merge into a single continuous marathon. The very air here is saturated with ancient knowledge, sheltering the adepts from the outside world. From early morning until late at night, Gamel never lets go of the tomes, absorbing every grain of wisdom. Having mastered the theory, he moves on to meditation, forcing the flows of mana to obediently circulate within. As soon as it gets dark, the young man exhausts himself with physical exercise, honing his fighting skills. His battle-hardened body works wonders, recovering from the most strenuous exertion in just a couple of hours. Having had his fill of theory from the library archives, Gamel feels it is time for the main test. After Hera took over the Green Tower, many gifted mages of Eros followed in her footsteps, reconsidering established dogmas. With a confident gait, he moves along the endless corridors of the academy. The heavy door opens, revealing a spacious room. Ahead of him lies someone whose influence on modern magic is difficult to overestimate. Gamel looks closely at her office, preparing to voice his daring idea. The Supreme Sorceress greets him warmly, reminding him of the age-old wisdom. For 300 years, the circular technique has proven its absolute effectiveness. But the young rebel is not afraid of authorities, and his words only evoke an astonished smile from his mentor. He openly declares his intention to take risks and combine familiar spells with the unique mana control techniques of the great Lionheart family. Amelia Mervyn freezes, feeling a chill of sudden realization run down her spine. Her eyes reflect not just the insolence of a boy, but a terrible memory of those who burned alive trying to curb their unruly energy. But Lord Lionheart only smirked confidently, crossing his arms over his chest as if challenging fate itself. His golden eyes gleam with dangerous passion and absolute confidence in victory. The mentor sighs heavily, mentally resigning herself to the inevitable madness of her ward. A magic circle flares up, and Amelia Merwin resolutely holds her staff out in front of her, ready at any moment to protect the reckless student from himself. Lord Lionheart closes his eyes and releases his inner power, enveloping himself in a radiant aura. His figure freezes in a concentrated pose as a heavy, oppressive atmosphere begins to thicken around him. A cold warning sounds deep in the mind. The slightest error in energy transformation threatens a catastrophic explosion. Amelia Mervyn watches his every move with intense intensity, holding her breath from the rising fear. The flow of energy around the young man increases, causing the air to literally tremble with tension. A titanic struggle unfolds within him, capable of crushing an inexperienced body. The teacher bites her lip in horror, frantically trying to understand how a child is able to keep such a crazy storm under control. She is overcome with superstitious awe. Is such a thing even possible for a mortal at such a young age? Meanwhile, in Lord Lionheart's hand, a concentrated sphere of purest power is born. Fire and mana are woven into a single deadly whirlwind right in the palm of his hand. The energy is pulsating, threatening to break out of control at any second and destroy everything around. But the guy, with a smooth, precise movement, directs all this power into one point, demonstrating filigree precision. Fast, Ankh for menu with their descended that tense forces of the Ura being. Eugene amazes the young sorceress, demonstrating not only unprecedented talent, but also a frightening flexibility in controlling magic. The genius himself only skeptically evaluates his first steps, clearly counting on much greater achievements. Wasting no time, he demands a worthy target to test the destructive power of his new abilities. Amelia blinks her eyes in confusion, trying to comprehend the scale of her new student's insolence. He wondered what kind of opponent would be able to quench his thirst for challenges, as ordinary dummies clearly wouldn't do. Swallowing in fear, she offers the first thing that comes to mind, a massive stone golem. A powerful spell shakes the air, and a gigantic figure of living stone and pure mana rises before them. The voice towers over the creator, ready to crush anyone the magician's will directs towards. But Eugene is eager to test the theory in practice, and he easily directs a clot of energy towards the mannequin. A blinding beam of pure power cuts through space, leaving only howling streams of wind in its wake. The next moment, all that remains of the formidable golem is a smoking pile of rubble with a chest burned through. The mentors standing nearby cannot hide their shock at such a crushing and careless triumph. After all, what Eugene playfully created with the white flame surpasses all conceivable standards of training. He converts the powers into familiar equivalents, concluding that the 3 flame stars easily replace the 3 classic magic circles. A stunned Roberian Ceres falls into a chair, still not believing what he heard. His gaze falls on Amelia, whose horrified nod confirms the insane truth. Biting his lip thoughtfully, Roberian wonders if writing a letter of recommendation would be madness. After all, we are talking about Acreon, a sacred citadel where only the elite and royalty are allowed to enter. But after weighing the pros and cons, he confidently waves his pen. This young demon in the flesh has definitely earned his chance. The fallen golem lies silently on the stones, marking the birth of a new legend, capable of rewriting the rules of the world of magic itself. Abram Hunnan signs the papers with concentration, realizing that such a formidable force requires a special approach. Amelia Mervyn notes with concern in her voice that such a decision could cause a storm among the other magicians. But the cunning schemer merely brushes it off. Only those who stubbornly turn a blind eye to the obvious truth will be outraged. Abraham Honan changes the subject, wondering what kind of business Eugene is doing in a city where he, in theory, knows no one at all. Amelia Mervyn freezes in surprise, her eyes wide. Abram Hunnan asks again with growing suspicion, has the young man really developed some secret interests? Meanwhile, in the bustling city, a majestic statue stands tall, capturing a great heroine of the past. The statue proudly raises its staff under the rays of the sun, preserving the memory of past battles. Eugene strolls through the streets, lost in his thoughts, until his path is blocked by an imposing figure. The unexpected encounter takes the young man by surprise, causing him to freeze in amazement before this colossal adversary. Gargus Lionheart beams with satisfaction, stroking his thick beard against a backdrop of blooming roses. Eugene widens his eyes in horror, not believing his own ears and barely recognizing his old acquaintance. Gargus Lionheart speaks smugly of time, which spares no one, although he himself looks like a cross between a knight and an ancient old man. Eugene wonders in shock, do 18-year-olds even grow beards like that? Gargus Lionheart is dismissive of the changes in Eugene's figure, stating that he still has a lot of growing to do to reach his size. A powerful handshake shakes the air, colliding two elements of youthful agility and accumulated strength. Gargus Lionheart is genuinely amazed, reading from his grip how much Eugene has grown and strengthened over the past years of hard training. But then the giant makes a mysterious gesture, like a magician who has decided to impress the audience with his main trump card. Out of nowhere appears the coveted vial of a shimmering elixir, which Gargus Lionheart proudly calls their family's secret development for insane muscle growth. Eugene looks skeptically at this dubious alchemy, rightly believing that it is unlikely that anyone would travel hundreds of leagues just to pass on a jar. Gargus Lionheart, with a mysterious look, asks the young man whether he has ever heard of the legendary Street of Short Jackets. Eugene immediately compares what he heard with that very ominous alley where the unbearable Yod always disappears. A gigantic, muscular relative with glowing eyes announces that a rare trophy, the legendary giant's testicles, is planned for auction at a local auction. Eugene's face instantly distorts with primal shock and absolute incomprehension of the absurdity that is happening. Gargus Lionheart confirms the crazy guess with beaming enthusiasm, immediately asking a reasonable question about the advisability of such a strange purchase. He explains with an important air that this artifact has incredible magical power, capable of performing miracles. The plan is extremely simple. Get hold of a valuable lot, hand it over to the most skilled alchemist, and receive in exchange the perfect elixir for colossal muscle growth. Waving his arms in the middle of the snowy street, the big guy laments that the astronomical sum he took with him may simply not be enough. Eugene steps back, horrified to realize that this big guy is about to borrow money from him. A flash of rage fills Gargus Lionheart's eyes as he realizes the gravity of the moment. In despair, the thug falls to his knees, begging for help in the middle of a busy street. Passers-by turn around in shock at the dramatic scene, while Eugene panics and tries to calm the madman down, drawing too much unwanted attention. Realizing the comical and awkward public nature of his situation, Gargus Lionheart immediately rises and, with a pompous air, vows to return every last coin with interest. Eugene just rolls his eyes tiredly, his whole appearance showing extreme skepticism toward such promises. The big guy is perplexed as to why such a grandiose undertaking doesn't evoke any response from the guy, or reminding him of his personal, powerful weapon. Eugene dismisses the questionable shops, admitting that his thoughts are elsewhere. In the dark, semi-dark corridors, his footsteps echo into silence, while an ominous figure in a dark cloak looms ahead. The assassin presses himself against the wall in horror, biting his fingers until they bleed from sticky fear at the sight of the formidable guest. At this moment, a cunning plan of revenge takes shape in Eugene's head, tied to the coming full moon. Panic terror grips the Shadow's victim, who senses the inevitable and terrible retribution for all past sins. However, Eugene himself considers this coincidence to be incredibly fortunate. Finding himself in a spacious office, he comes face to face with the one who holds the strings of this strange challenge. The mentor's gentle smile does not foreshadow a storm, but the invitation to take a seat at the table sounds unyielding. The tension between them could be cut with a knife as they stare at each other in the silence of the opulent hall. The guy frowns, trying to understand the true reason behind such sudden and strange attention to his person. But the interlocutor only smiles slyly, pointing to an impressive stack of documents floating in the air. One of the sheets separates from the rest with a soft whistle and flies smoothly straight into the hands of a stunned Eugene. The boy's gaze glides over the mysterious runes and thick wax seal adorning the official form. A sudden cry escapes his chest as the meaning of what he wrote dawns on him. Is this really a trip to Acreon? The majestic spires of the ancient city rise above the clouds, guarding secrets that put any library in the tower to shame. The guy, with a trepidation in his voice, admits that he feels completely unprepared for such a serious step. However, the experienced mentor simply folds his hands reassuringly, assuring that there simply couldn't be a better moment to start. He promises the young man grand prospects that could revolutionize his understanding of magical science. One only has to touch sacred knowledge, and the doors to a completely new world will open for the budding magician. Eugene shakes his head skeptically, doubting his own abilities, but the thought of secret knowledge is already creeping into his head. The interlocutor confirms the guess with a smile. Yes, those same legendary treatises of the wise Sen are indeed kept in Acreon. It is there that rests the priceless 3-volume work on witchcraft, written by the great sorceress in the twilight of her days. This fundamental work is rightfully considered the pinnacle of magical art on the entire continent. Existing in a single copy, this book contains absolute truth and the secrets of the highest mastery, Gus and Mar. The knowledge contained in the tome completely changed his understanding of magical sciences. Everything he had learned up to that point suddenly seemed like child's play to him. Lord Lionheart turns his gaze to his interlocutor, intending to find out his opinion. He smiles softly, as if skillfully weaving an invisible intrigue. At this moment, Gameldinas feels a slight tension, suspecting a trick. But the young aristocrat immediately smooths things over with a casual laugh. Gameldinas remains silent, pondering what he has heard and weighing every step. The Lord's patience is exhausted. He demands to know the name of the one hiding behind the mask. The capital's dark streets hide far more dangerous secrets than they seem at first glance. Lord Lionheart is slightly embarrassed under his interlocutor's piercing gaze. Gameldinas clearly understands. This cunning man sees right through him. The interlocutor tries to find the right words, feeling awkward at the moment. He sighs heavily, admitting the bitter truth about the mistakes of others. The city's nightlife is fraught with temptations that are difficult for the average person to resist. Hidden threats become nightmares for those who let their guard down. Even the vicious creatures of the night are subject to strict laws and inevitable order. Gameldinas clenches his fists, holding back the rising irritation. His interlocutor continues to weigh his words, trying to smooth over the unpleasant topic. The bewilderment on Gameldinas's face turns to genuine shock. Memories of the past reveal the true cost of the decisions made 4 years ago. Failures followed the young man like an evil fate. The mentors from the Magic Tower desperately tried to channel his energy in the right direction, but all efforts fell into disarray. However, the endless tension threatened to break the fragile balance. It was necessary to give him a break, although the line of what was permissible should not be crossed under any circumstances. However, not everyone can maintain such a pace. While some shone with natural talent and enormous ambition, others sank into the abyss of despair. The lonely figure froze under the weight of others' ridicule and contemptuous glances. The situation left much to be desired, but it was impossible to give up. The shadows of the past whispered terrible truths. Demons remain demons, even if they hide their fangs behind smiles. The look fills with determination. The truth will have to be found independently. The streets are plunged into an ominous crimson twilight. Figures in dark robes were lost among the crowd, hiding their true faces. Bewilderment gives way to a dull irritation from the need to pretend. Why was it necessary to hide your faces under masks? The assassin feels uncomfortable in this masquerade, but rules are rules. Communication with the outside world is maintained through artifacts that detect only certain frequencies. The person on the other end of the line shares the details of the operation. The questions come pouring in, one after another. How does the informant know such details? The specifics of the location impose strict restrictions on the communication channels used. The irritation is growing with every second because the conspiracy is bursting at the seams. Every corner of this isolated world is subject to strict security protocols. Such precautions only fuel paranoia, forcing everyone to watch their every move. It's easy to get lost in this gloomy crowd, but vigilance here is a matter of survival. The streets are filled with those who prefer to remain in the shadows, hiding their faces under hoods. But behind the outward diversity of the crowd lies an iron set of immutable laws. Dark corridors lead further into the estate, where strangers are not welcome unless absolutely necessary. The control panel with multicolored indicators confirms the system's readiness to receive guests. Gargus Lionheart and Gameldinas settle into a luxurious sofa, waiting for the show to begin. Gameldinas remarks with a grin that he only dropped in out of pure idle curiosity and a desire to while away the time. A flash of magical energy illuminates the stage, drawing everyone's attention to the mysterious organizer. The host, wearing an elegant suit and mask, greets the audience with a theatrical bow. His voice exudes honeyed politeness, promising the rarest and most outlandish lots. The special pride of this auction is the rarest artifacts and ingredients from the lands of Helmut itself. The assistant shows the public an impressive horn, and the bidding opens at an astronomical price. The catalog is replete with curiosities, from prosia fruits to mandrake roots and fragile uzrak buds. However, Gameldinas is not yet impressed by the selection, and he jokingly asks if they will offer anything more interesting. Gargus Lionheart tenses slightly as he watches his companion's eccentric behavior. The organizer presents the next lot to the public, a mysterious item that the organizers have been trying unsuccessfully to get rid of for a long time. Gamaldinus listens attentively to the overly drawn-out description of the dubious object. The presenter enthusiastically describes how the wondrous thing enchantingly shines in the moonlight, attracting connoisseurs of beauty. The auctioneer's words cut the ear, causing the exorbitant sum to soar into the air with the dry click of the opening box. Gamaldinus freezes, looking at what is happening with the face of a man who has just had his last hopes taken away. But there is no time to think. A sharp slap of the palm on the button shakes the air under the astonished gaze of the companions. Gargus Lionheart turns around at his comrade, stunned, not believing his own eyes. And the masked auction organizer merely spreads his arms gracefully, welcoming the insane bid. The legendary image of the moonlight sword, whose radiance can crush any darkness, comes to mind. But memory immediately brings up the harsh truth. This weapon is incorruptible and recognizes only its true owner. Gamaldinus frowned, trying to comprehend the scale of the mystery that had just been revealed. Inside the humble velvet abode lies only a cold fragment of former grandeur. A masked servant hands over the coveted burden to the winner of the auction. Gamaldinus slowly lifts the lid, holding his breath under his comrade's anxious gaze. Fingers carefully bring to light a smooth, shining fragment. The great vermouth Lionheart, who left behind only mysteries and seals, appears before my mind's eye once again. The blade's tip pierces the spatial veil, a reminder of the ancient artifact's invincible power. The young hero peers into the smooth surface of the crystal, trying to read its hidden essence. The shard makes no sound, maintaining an absolute, chilling silence. The silence is broken by a strange hum running right through my head. A sudden flash lights up his face as a heavy metal communication token falls into his hands. Hiding his face with the hood, the hero turns sharply, causing his companion to blink in confusion. Having thrown down a weighty map as a farewell, he leaves no hesitation in leaving resources for future battles. The sign of the old establishment barely sways in the rays of the sunset, hiding the secrets of this place behind it. A cloaked traveler stops at the threshold, looking appraisingly at the gloomy entrance. Two massive guards with demonic features immediately block his path, warily peering at the stranger. The guy under the hood frowns. Demons are not uncommon here, but he has never encountered them after being reborn. Without slowing down, he confidently declares his intention to go inside. One of the guards freezes in silent question, not fully understanding the newcomer's audacity. Instead of unnecessary words, the hero, with a graceful movement, shows off weighty bills that instantly change the rules of the game. An instant change of tone, the guards immediately respectfully step aside, opening the way for the generous guest. Inside, the atmosphere is noisy and tavern-like, with demonic waitresses keeping the patrons entertained. A seductive succubus immediately sits down next to our hero, but his thoughts are clearly not occupied with entertainment. With cold calm, he directly asks about the location of the bedrooms, slightly misleading his companion. She smiles slyly, interpreting his directness in her own way and anticipating the fun that is about to happen. She showers him with compliments with a playful laugh, hinting at the secrets of the underground floors. With a deft movement, the succubus fills the mug with a foamy drink, inviting her to relax before moving on. The hero decisively stops her hand, making it clear that he has no time for empty gatherings. Having interpreted the gesture in her own way, the seductress playfully agrees to a change of scenery and heads into the corridor. The hero's confident gait can be heard in the semi-darkness of the corridor leading deep into the building. She continues to flirt, promising only slight fatigue after she takes what is due to her. But under the hood lies a cold mind. The hero has already collected all the necessary information. Without giving the seductress time to come to her senses, he abruptly hands her a payment for her silence, cutting off all games at the root. The stunned demoness blinks her eyes in confusion, not understanding what is happening to this strange visitor. But there is no time to think. The man resolutely heads for the exit, throwing out an offer to accompany the guest to the restaurant. Helpful staff immediately appear at the door, politely inquiring about the guest's well-being and offering the guest dinner. The establishment greets us with the aroma of roasted meat, and our hero pounces on the hearty meal with gusto, oblivious to those around him. Suddenly, his gaze catches on something interesting, causing him to freeze with a piece of meat in his teeth. The door swings open, and two menacing guards drag another poor fellow out of the room by the arms. The hero watches the procession with a heavy gaze, feeling a bad feeling boiling inside. Beneath the hood lies the tired face of Robarian Serpis, whose golden eyes emanate a deep melancholy. His once human hands were now a deathly gray and sharpened into claws, a reminder of the terrible transformation. Supported by his faithful servants, the old man can barely move his legs, lamenting his lost strength. But for the hero watching them, this spectacle becomes a real trigger. Rage burns him from the inside. The guards lead the unfortunate man away, leaving behind only the echo of heavy footsteps and the indifference of the other visitors. Unable to bear it any longer, the hero suddenly rises from the table, pushing his chair away with a bang. He follows unnoticed on the heels of the procession, disappearing into the crimson twilight of the gloomy streets. Step by step, leaving no unnecessary traces, the shadow of the pursuer moves relentlessly behind. Cold calculation can be seen in his gaze. The moment for decisive action has almost arrived. Another door slams in the guard's face, hiding the old man behind stone walls. Hiding in a dark alley, the hero assesses the situation under the cold light of the moon. A sharp attack breaks the silence of the night. New, uninvited guests block the way. In the shadow of the dim streetlights, 3 big men block the way, ready to defend their order with their fists. One of the uninvited guests goes wild from the stranger's insolence, losing all control of himself. Arrogant bullies surround the cloaked figure, confident in their superiority on these streets, but a sudden rough grip digs into his throat, instantly cutting off any threats. The brute stares at the uninvited guest, trying to intimidate him with his animalistic rage. The fair-haired insolent man merely curls his lips into a mocking grin, parrying the pressure with eerie calm. Genuine horror flashes in the eyes of the arrogant bull, replacing his recent arrogance. A powerful counterattack knocks the giant off his feet, causing him to choke on his own blood. The other bandits watch in shock as their comrade collapses onto the cobblestones with one movement. Having come to their senses from what they saw, the remaining thugs break loose from their chains, cursing as they go. They rush into the attack with cold weapons at the ready, intending to grind the insolent man into dust. The gang leader instantly closes the distance, delivering a sweeping blow from behind. His partner immediately joins in from the left, cutting the air with a deadly blade. The 2 fighters' synchronized attack was supposed to cut the target in half, but it hits nothing. A clever maneuver leaves the attackers with nothing. Their blades cut only through the night darkness. A powerful roundhouse kick sends both opponents into a deep knockout in the middle of the street. The lifeless bodies of bandits collapse onto the cold stones to the sound of defeated ambitions. A heavy boot contemptuously presses the head of the defeated bully to the ground. The winner looks around the battlefield with slight disappointment, where no one remains standing. A casual tread breaks the silence of the deserted block where this short skirmish ended. Only a cold wind walks among the broken stones, while the shadow in the cloak dissolves into the night. The pungent smell of chemicals immediately betrays the presence of an intruder, causing the assassin to become wary. The sudden appearance of a hooded figure leaves the conspirators in complete shock. Gargus Lionheart looks around frantically, trying to figure out how the enemy got past the elite guard. But instead of panic, a creepy, anticipatory smile blossoms on the uninvited guest's face. Like enraged animals, the guards rush forward with cries of despair. Every movement is imbued with a mortal threat, but the uninvited guest only watches them silently. Attack follows attack, but the enemy meets their onslaught with cold blood and bare hands. A powerful magical surge the size of a wave destroys everyone in its path. A crushing blow falls upon the attackers, instantly knocking the wind out of them. One of the leaders is defeated and falls limply onto the cold floor. The remaining enemies realize with horror that this battle was lost before it even began. But the winner has no time for conversation. He decisively rips the blade from its sheath. Even a wounded enemy trembles with animal fear under the heavy gaze of an uninvited guest. The magical aura flares up with renewed vigor, raising a whirlwind of icy wind around it. A powerful wave of energy spreads in all directions, sweeping away everything in its path. Having assessed the situation, the hero realizes that the main target is hiding somewhere above. A sudden flash of determination flashes in his eyes before he throws again. Surrounded by a glowing trail of energy, he rushes to solve the mystery. A firm step echoes in the silence of the half-empty building. Cold calculation and unyielding will lead him through the darkness to the inevitable end. With lightning speed, Lord Lionheart retrieves a mysterious artifact that could change the course of events. A powerful burst of energy tears apart space, releasing the destructive power of the shard. The boy smiles as he realizes the true value of the relic. Although it is only a fragment, it is capable of blocking any mana. The enemy freezes in stupor, not believing what is happening, and feverishly trying to figure out how this is even possible. Glade's stern warnings flash through their minds, for before them stands a direct descendant of Vermouth himself. A flash of rage contorts Lord Lionheart's face as he comes face to face with his enemies. Every cell of his body is filled with fighting determination, and his gaze burns with an indomitable flame. The force field begins to vibrate, concentrating a protective aura around it. A powerful wave spreads out in all directions, sweeping away everything in its path and forcing opponents to retreat. Lord Lionheart stands at the center of the storm, an embodiment of unwavering strength and menace. Confusion and fear overwhelm the elder, who realizes the hopelessness of his situation. The doors swing open, and two formidable demons enter the arena, ready to defend their master. These massive creatures exude menace, inspiring primal terror with their very appearance. Lord Lionheart only smirks, recognizing the very monsters that brought the uninvited guests here. Due to the powerful mental pressure, the demons clutch their heads, experiencing unbearable pain. The boy assumes a perfect fighting stance, smoothly drawing his blade to the accompaniment of flaring mana. An icy confidence emanates from his words as he coldly challenges his enemies. The instant attack takes the demons by surprise, but Lord Lionheart meets their attack with absolute composure. His hand swings out in a deadly fashion, creating a tornado of pure energy. A thunderous blast rocks the ruins, scattering stone debris and leaving enemies in deep shock. Whirling streams of magic literally tear opponents apart, causing them to choke on their own blood. One of the demonic soldiers rushes forward with a wild cry, but is met with the iron determination of the young hero. A powerful slashing blow tears through the air with a bloody glow, leaving the enemy no chance to defend himself. The merciless blade severs the limb from the body, sending the monster into shock under the cover of a glowing aura. Concentrating all his fury in one movement, the fighter closes the distance with lightning speed. His powerful hand grabs the enemy's face, slamming him into the ground with crushing force. A flash of pure energy sweeps across the battlefield as the defeated enemy is completely crushed. Stunned enemies fall around, while the victor stands proudly over the fallen remnants of the evil army. A bright glow envelops the hero's head, triggering a surprising and mysterious transformation. The old hooded mage recoils, unable to believe his own eyes and trembling with primal terror. The old appearance is replaced by a new force. A gray-haired warrior with a piercing gaze of golden eyes coldly assesses the situation. With a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth, he throws a mocking remark at his stunned opponent. A quick step forward causes the enemy to throw up his hands in panic, trying to protect himself from the inevitable reprisal. The cornered sorcerer convulsively swallows clots of blood, frantically trying to find a way out of the trap. With a mad cry of despair, he points his terrible staff with a skull on top straight at the offender. A dark flame erupts from the top, enveloping the space in an ominous crimson light. But the rage of the reborn hero cannot be stopped. His gaze is full of cold, unforgiving steel. Another swing shatters the enemy's spell into pieces, shaking the underground vaults with a powerful explosion. Like a predator about to make the decisive throw, he quickly closes the remaining distance. His hand is already reaching for the throat of his trembling enemy to put the final point in this battle. The man's face contorts into a grimace of pure horror as the cold steel finds its way right to his throat. The muffled, "I'll kill," that escapes his lips sounds pathetic and unconvincing in the face of inevitable retribution. Every drop of sweat on his grayed skin reflects absolute helplessness in the face of death. Behind the frightened traitor, the figure of Gamaldinus looms, his blade leaving no room to maneuver. With icy calm, Gamaldinus loosens his grip slightly, allowing his enemy to feel the stupidity of his situation. The gaze falls on the ominous traces of a dark ritual, where something terrible is hidden behind the bones and runes. The magical substance in the vessel pulsates with a living pulse, emitting powerful and disturbing energy. Gamaldinus peers into this eerie substance, trying to unravel the true scale of what was intended. The trembling accomplice's face is distorted with panic, revealing all his secret fears. Legends of noble unicorns, whose pure mana and divine energy are valued above human life, flash through my memory. Gamaldinus looks around the ominous circle, realizing the scale of the crime committed. In a moment, the image of an ancient incubus, a devoted servant of Duchess Jabella herself, comes to life in the memory. Suddenly, a shadow of a terrifying creature appears in the imagination, having survived the centuries and sharing power over Helmut. Standing before the remains of the ritual, Gamaldinus' thoughts return to the maddening details of the deal. Could all this madness really have been done for the sake of a whim of a madman, intoxicated with power and drugs? The name of the mysterious Master Yoda emerges, whose will forced this unfortunate man to commit treason. A desperate cry of despair escapes the lips of the broken man as he falls to his knees before the power of Lionheart. But Gamaldinus coldly interrupts these excuses, reminding him of the generous payment that clouded the traitor's mind. With one harsh gesture, he points out the true motive that drove his accomplice to make a deal with the shadows. The flash of rage in Gamaldinus's eyes puts a bold end to this interrogation. Any extra word will be the last. The assassin begs for mercy, his whole body trembling under the weight of inevitable retribution. Gamaldinus watches his fallen enemy with a cold, detached weariness. A sudden flash of anger distorts the warrior's face. Patience is running out. With one sharp movement, he takes off, throwing his hand forward. The blow reaches its target with crushing force, knocking the opponent down with a backhand. Amazement and pain freeze in the eyes of the stunned enemy, wide with horror. Gamaldinus looms over the fallen man, cutting off any attempts at resistance. With chilling calm, he leans closer, asking a question that brooks no argument. The victim's face, distorted with fear, reflects the hopelessness of this interrogation.